Chapter 1. 1. Prologue. Qingyu. Save me. Qingyu. A swath of fiery light shot up into the sky. An exquisite and beautiful little boy was seated on a wheelchair, looking in despair and helplessness at the similarly exquisite-looking little girl not far away from him. What was different was that the little girl had an exceptionally timid and frightened expression as she looked at the boy trapped in the fire, even seemingly looking like she was thinking of running away. The boy's body was being roasted and seared by the increasingly heat from the blazingly hot flames. He gritted his teeth tightly together, looking at the girl one final time before he closed his eyes. Qingyu, leave. Seemingly awash with relief, the little girl immediately turned herself around and went running away without even looking back once, till she disappeared from the boy's sight. The little boy lowered his eyes and laughed mockingly. A crystal-clear teardrop slid down from the corner of his eye, like he had just given up on his final grasp upon any delusions. He will die, right? He should have died long ago. Not only was he going to die under the hands of those people who wanted him dead, he was also going to die at the hands of his weak and useless sister who only knew how to hide in a turtle shell. He hated that, but he was powerless. An 8-year-old child, dragging a broken body around. What could he do? The little girl's face was filled with panic, her legs under her not stopping as she ran, seemingly seeking to leave this dangerous place far behind her, not caring in the least about the boy's safety or well-being. Dumb. How can you run away? Go back there and save him. A highly translucent and illusory shadow stood beside her, wanting to pull her back, but the girl went right through the body. The shadow was stunned for a moment. Oh, she was already dead, and is now a spirit body. She had completely forgotten about it. It could be because she had been dead for too long and did not need to eat nor did she need to sleep, hence she had thought that she was still alive, living in this world in another form. She watched the little girl run stumbling away in the distance, but saw that her body had begun to increasingly turn translucent, looking like the spirit was about to depart from the shell. That was a sign that a person was about to die. As predicted, in her panic, the girl actually tripped over a protruding pebble and fell heavily to the ground, her forehead landing right upon the broken gravel, the blood flowing out unceasingly. The spirit that had half departed from her body then slipped right out completely and then dissipated into the wind, where it was not known where it had scattered to. Qingyu was stunned by the scene. She had not thought that she would be able to witness such a thing. Could it be because she had already died, and hence could see this? She was not given much time to think much about it when she already found herself sucked away by a great force to enter into the body of the girl who had just died. And the spirit and body shell melded together just absolutely perfectly. She did not know how many years it had been already since she came to this strange world, and had never thought that the day would come where she could actually be reborn in such a strange manner. Her spirit that had not dissipated away for so long, was it waiting just for this day? At that very last moment, she seemed to have seen the little girl telling her tearfully to live well on her behalf, and to look after her little brother. At the moment that Qingyu agreed, she had then left peacefully. By the time the unconscious little girl woke up again, her eyes looked completely different. The timid weakness from before had disappeared without a trace, replaced with a quiet, steady and deadly stillness, without a single ripple of emotion, where they seemed to be filled with intelligence and a maturity that could see through all, a lone spirit that had come from a different world. Chapter 1. 2. Prologue. Her forehead still had blood dripping down, with some flowing into her eyes, blurring her sight, but her footsteps did not stop, slow and determined as they moved towards the place with the fiery light. Thick smoke choked the young boy as he coughed incessantly, unable to even open his eyes. He racked his mind, thinking up every way he could, but it was to no avail. Several overhead beams had fallen down in front of him, and if his legs could still walk, he would have risked everything to charge his way out. But now, though the heart wanted to, his body was powerless. He was destined to face this calamity. But how he hated his fate. His ears suddenly detected sounds of movement. After the young boy opened his eyes weakly, what he saw caused him to stare in shock. The girl was standing right by the well, struggling to draw bucket after bucket of water from the well before pouring them over her own self, till her entire body was completely drenched. The water in deep autumn was really very cold, and if she continued to do that, she would definitely fall sick. But her demeanor was so calm that it was terrifying, like she was a machine that had been programmed to carry out a task. The young boy watched her actions in a stunned daze, amusement in his eyes together mixed with bafflement. Hadn't Qingyu already left? Why had she come back? And what was she doing? The next second, he saw that she had found herself a piece of loose and oversized clothing from God knows where. Soaking it wet with water, she then draped it over herself and charged speedily into the fire. It shocked the young boy so hard, he almost jumped up as a shout tore out from his throat. Qingyu, you dumb moron. What are you doing back here? Get away from here now. Go far, far away, and never come back. I do not need you to save me, as you will only burden me. The young boy was feeling choked up, and he could not say another word. How could he possibly not see that she had come here wanting to save him? But she was still so young and did not possess the ability to do it at all. Moreover, he was a cripple who was not all that mobile. To tell the truth, the fact that Qingyu had carried things out to this stage already pleased him very much. At least, he would be able to die with a smile. But in future, no one will be able to talk to her anymore. Qingyu looked at his tear-filled face, which was crying, and then smiling, where she then unconsciously creased up her brows as she said in a soft voice, so full of nonsense. Immediately feeling that something wasn't right, she then quickly said, "Don't worry, I'll be fine, and I will get you out of here." The young boy's emotions was fluctuating greatly, as Qingyu had never ever shown such an impatient expression before, and she was even trying to comfort him. It must be known that she would not even dare to speak a single word once she became nervous. There wasn't time for him to react at all before Qingyu had already picked him right off the wheelchair. He was literally picked right off, grabbed by the collar unceremoniously, and with a slight bending of her back, he was firmly slung across her back. This was about the first time that the young boy found himself being carried on someone's back all his life. And it was by the elder sister, who was so much smaller in size than him. The person he had always loved and hated at the same time. But suddenly being carried on her thin back, the young boy's face immediately flushed a deep red. You
put me down now.
Really? How could you possibly be able to carry me? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. How could a girl possibly piggyback a boy? The young boy was humiliated and angry. What would people say if they saw this? Shut up. Qingyu's brows were furrowed as she looked at the several thick beams in front. She was silent for a while before she freed up one hand, suddenly lashing it forward. A chill light manifested. The blaze quickly shrank, where a layer of frost actually formed. She was rather annoyed as she cursed in a low voice before she strode over the heavy beams with the boy on her back. In just moments, the blazing fire flared up into a roar once again. And the boy on her back had already fainted into unconsciousness from having been trapped within the choking smoke for too long. Chapter 2. 1. Looks that brings down cities. The Blue Waves Kingdom was a kingdom that sat beside mountains and lay by the water, within highly advantageous geographical location. Its population was numerous, its people honest and guileless. Hence, under the current situation where 3 countries stood in balance against each other, they still held a slight edge over the other 2 kingdoms. The reason that Blue Wave Kingdom had such an advantage was not just due to its superior geographical location, but also in part because they had a far-sighted emperor. The Blue Wave Kingdom also had the Duke of Eternal Peace, who was invincible in battle. With just the name of Yen Su there in the kingdom, it already drove fear into the hearts of the generals from the other countries. In recent years, his eldest son Yan Shicheng's reputation had been rising fast as well, having followed the Duke of Eternal Peace to win quite a bit of merit in battle. Just 20 years of age, and he had already been bestowed with the title of a general, the place the Yen family had in the emperor's heart clearly evident. Princess, His Highness and the general will be returning back to the capital today, and the entire place is already filled with citizens outside, but you do not seem to be anxious in the slightest. A servant maid with 2 hairpins stuck in her hair muttered as she put on the last pearl hairpin for the lady. The lady before the bronze mirror looked up, and it was an amazing sight. The first thing that shone out before one's eyes was upon the flawlessly fair skin on her forehead. There was a faint pinkish bloom that looked exquisitely enchanting. That was not a result of deliberate embellishment upon that fair skin, but a pristine and saintly flower that she had been born with, and that flower had a beautiful name, called Ardent Violet. A daughter born to the Eternal Peace Duke's manor 16 years ago, where a good half of the sky had turned red then, the shape of the colorful clouds had formed to resemble a soaring phoenix. The Blue Wave Emperor had been delighted, and he immediately bestowed upon the newborn the title of Princess Phoenix Essence, where he even went on to order a pre-arranged engagement to the Crown Prince, Xian Yuan Che, in marriage. Yan Ning Luo proved to become worthy of being like a phoenix. She was gifted and intelligent, her body's constitution highly outstanding, and she attracted the attention of the faint Miss Sex sect leader, which was among the 3 biggest sects, who took her in as a direct disciple. To the Blue Wave Kingdom, this was a matter of unparalleled honor and glory. Yan Ning Luo was also an example the distinguished daughters of other noble families looked up to, and not only men were infatuated and besotted with her, even the ladies could not resist her charms and allure. Added to that, Yan Ning Luo's personality was a little on the cold side. The countenance that could bring down cities together with that icy and snow-cold demeanor made her seem like an untainted celestial goddess descended, which made it all so reasonable that she was so highly sought after and revered. The servant maid at her back was still muttering on when Yan Ning Luo suddenly stood up, which made the servant girl jump in shock. Just as her eyes were staring wide and looking highly helpless, the lady's voice that was filled with grace and allure slowly wafted over. "Let's go." The servant girl then managed to react, fumbling as she hurried to pick up a thin veil at the side. "Princess, would you like to veil your countenance? There's so many people out there today. If you go out just like that, you will definitely cause a great furor." "No worries, I will not show myself," Yan Ning Luo said indifferently, and then went walking out of the room. Her gaze then suddenly turned towards a particular corner, where her eyes then darkened, and she went on to order the help. "On a day like this, remember to watch them closely. Better not allow them to leave the house at all." "Yes, Princess." The Duke of Eternal Peace was highly favored by the Emperor, and in terms of all things material like food, clothes, and expenditure, no one else could compare to him except for the imperial palace itself. But within the vast Duke's manor, where everything was splendorous and majestic, a single place in there did not fit in with everything else at all. The place was remote and quiet, and besides the place the servants lived in, that was about the most crudely simple place in the entire manor. Although the little courtyard was remote and very simple, but it was fantastically quiet and tranquil, a place where not many people would usually come. There was a stone table in the yard outside, and a young youth was seated there, quietly reading a book. He looked to be roughly about 13 or 14 years of age, with a pair of exquisite-looking eyes, the ends slanting upwards attractively that were bright and lively. He had clear, smooth skin, a pair of light pink lips under that straight, high-bridged nose. Chapter 2. 2. Looks that brings down cities. The doors of the house inside the place were suddenly opened, and the youth subconsciously raised his head up to look, when he then froze. He saw the slender figure of a youth, the purple clothes on him complementing the jade-like complexion of his face, exceptionally handsome-looking. His long hair was bound up high with a hair ribbon, neatly, without a single strand out of place. His looks were highly similar to the other youth, but compared to that dazzling and eye-catching youth filled with kindly righteousness, the ends of this youth's eyes slanted up slightly higher, giving him an added devilish allure, just like a sly and crafty fox. The first youth was stunned for quite a while before he then said in bewilderment, "Qingyu. This fine-looking youth here, isn't that Qingyu cross-dressed as a male?" Since her own biological younger brother could not properly recognize her, it was then thought that other people would not notice a thing even if she was face-to-face with them. "Why are you dressed like this for?" Qingyu glanced at him. "Your royal father has returned. Aren't you going out to welcome him? He is also your royal father." Qing Bei retorted with his brows creased together. I've said it many times. I am not the real Qing Yu. I came from another world, and am similarly named Qing Yu, and that is all. I don't care where you came from. You are Qing Yu, and you're my elder sister. Even if you are not, you are now occupying Qing Yu's body, and that is something you cannot deny. In the 6 years since Qing Yu had come to this strange world, this same charade would replay every once in a while in their conversations with each other. Especially from the moment after she healed his legs and he had stood up anew from his wheelchair, the eyes that stared at Qing Yu had suddenly seemed to have decided on something in that instant, where he had then since stuck to her like a plaster, while doing it and proclaiming it to be only proper and right. The thing that Qing Bei could be certain of was that this person definitely was not Qing Yu, and there were too many secrets on her that nobody knew anything about. Like how she had managed to heal his crippled legs when even the palace's imperial physicians had been helpless with, and also when black-robed assassins had sneaked in to kill them but were dealt with by Qing Yu without alarming anyone in the end. He only knew that she would not harm him, or she wouldn't have saved him back then with no regard for her own safety. Qing Yu met his eyes quietly for a while, before turning her head away as she said indifferently, "Change clothes.
Go out."
For a girl about 13-14 years of age, it was thought that few were as tall and slender as Qing Yu. Hence, with her dressed as a male, nothing seemed out of place, but instead looked more like a male than the true blue boy that Qing Bei was. Anyway, Qing Bei had never ever met any girl that could be so straightforward and candid. With two such outstanding-looking youths appearing upon the streets, they immediately caused quite a bout of furor. Especially Qing Yu's pair of incredibly alluring eyes, even when she did not deliberately tempt people, a mere casual glance from those eyes would easily crumble a great part of the people. All the young girls whose eyes were shining brightly with hearts aflutter, they seemed to have forgotten that today was the day they were to welcome the Duke of Eternal Peace returning back to the imperial capital, their attention completely captivated, waiting for one single glance from the youth to rest on them. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Because his sudden appearance among them had made them mad with delight. The response they got only left them all the more disappointed and frustrated. Gathered Cloudloft, finally escaping out from the squeezy crowd after much difficulty, even Qing Bei was feeling slightly out of breath at that moment. It had already been 2 years since his legs had recovered, but in order to not draw eyes and ears to himself, he never stood up to walk when anyone was around. With such a bout of exertion, he was clearly finding it a tad bit hard to withstand. And the chief culprit that caused all of it in the first place was not even rosy-cheeked nor out of breath in the slightest. Chapter 3. 1. The Duke of Eternal Peace, not only was she not out of breath in the slightest, she even went on to calmly pour herself a cup of tea and took a sip from it. "Qing Yu, you're really quite resilient." His lips stiff, Qing Bei made this statement unreservedly. I'm all right." Qing Yu did not give too big a reaction, as after all such a kind of body constitution is highly sought after by women, something that she had already deeply experienced in her past life. This body's original self was more eye-catching than her in her past life, and the body still hadn't fully developed yet. Wait for another 2 years when her features fully bloom. That would then be the time it would become truly terrifying. Just when Qing Bei was about to say something else, he suddenly heard a chorus of cheers erupting from below. Looking down through the half-opened window, there was a troop of soldiers approaching in a grand march from a distance away, the sound of hooves exceptionally in sync. The one person in the lead was about 40 years of age, his facial features handsome and striking, filled with an insightful and mature charm, which greatly attracted the eyes of many a middle-aged woman among the crowd. He was a man subservient only to one, and stood above all others, the Duke of Eternal Peace, who was sworn to brotherhood with the Blue Waves Emperor, Yen Su. Respects to the Duke of Eternal Peace on his glorious return. Someone took the lead to shout those words aloud, and the citizens on the street then all fell to their knees thereafter, where at a glance, a sea of black-haired heads lowered could be seen. This ostentatious display is almost catching up to that of the emperors already. Qing Yu clicked her tongue. to say with indifference. Yen Su was often not in the capital city, and the Duke Manor's affairs were mostly left in the hands of his spouse, the Duchess. Objectively speaking, he treated every one of his children rather well, and did not show all that much special favoritism but was unable to look after them all the time, with the exception of Yan Shicheng, who followed him at his side, that enjoyed a bit more of his favor. Qingbei had suddenly become a cripple who had to rely on a wheelchair, and Qingyu, who was always such an innocent and jovial child, had turned to become so highly timid and passive. In the end, he could not be completely absolved of responsibility for that, as if it was not for his silent acquiescence. How could that woman possibly dare to reach her hands so far? That was a debt that must not be left unpursued. It could be because her gaze had been too fiery hot when, even with that distance between them, Yen Su still felt it, but when he looked up, he was not able to see the owner of that gaze. Yen Su's army slowly came in closer from afar, and the young man riding on a reddish-brown warhorse right behind him was Yan Shicheng, handsome and masculine-looking, his brows and eyes righteous. His repute and standing in the capital city was also rather good, and he was well liked by the people. Just as everyone tilted their head up to peer at the man seated upon the towering warhorse, a group of men came walking over from further up front, carrying several luxurious sedan chairs behind them. Duke of Eternal Peace, General Yan, you've returned at last. His Majesty has been waiting in the palace, and I came here to request for your Highness to quickly bring your family to the palace. A pale, beardless, middle-aged man dressed in the red clothes of an official said as he greeted with a bow. Yen Su's expression turned slightly startled. Although he was puzzled why His Majesty was summoning him into the palace so anxiously, he did not speak about it but went on to pass down his orders to his lieutenants behind him, before climbing onto the sedan chairs with Yan Shicheng immediately. After Yen Su and the convoy had gone far away, the rest of the army then split up two ways, one half making their way to the Eternal Peace Duke's manor, and the other half following behind as they marched towards the imperial palace. The citizens were left bewildered and baffled, as they all huddled their heads together in excited discussion. The Duke of Eternal Peace is being summoned straight into the palace immediately upon his return. Could something big have happened? Having just tidied up the situation at the borders, are we going into war again? Don't make such wild guesses. But even if it's a war, we are not afraid. When has the Duke of Eternal Peace ever suffered a defeat? That's true. Qingyu retracted her gaze and saw the youth sitting opposite her had his brows knitted up in worry, not knowing what he was thinking. She immediately reached out with her hand and flicked her finger hard upon his forehead as she said, "Come back already." Chapter 3. 2. The Duke of Eternal Peace Qingbei gasped and stared angrily at her. "What are you doing? His person has left long ago, and you're still staring." Qingyu jeered, ignoring the cold expression on his face. "I had thought that it would be interesting, but it turned out to be so boring." Her body then stood up from her chair as she went walking downstairs slowly. "Where are you going?" Qingbei asked as he thought to himself that he was the one who followed her out here today, and he had not once come out for so many years already. It would be safer for him to stick with her. Qingyu went out from the gathering cloud loft by the back door, and the youth following behind her was feeling puzzled why she seemed to be so familiar with this place, when in the next second as they stepped out through the door, he was immediately stunned into immobility. "Young Master Qing, you've finally come. You've made my lonesome, unable to eat or sleep thinking about you all these days. I did not see you." A mushy and coquettish voice reached them, immediately followed by a strong fragrance hitting them straight on their faces. Qingyu instinctively dodged to the side, and that fragrant figure's leaping pounce then landed upon the youth behind her, catching him in an embrace. Qingbei was a pure and untainted youth who had lived a life above the vices of the common populace. He had always been almost obsessed with cleanliness from a very young age and did not like to come into physical contact with people. Now that he was suddenly being hugged by a woman of completely unknown origins, whose entire body was so filled with scented powder, his handsome face began to change in various shades like a color palette. The hands within the sleeves then unconsciously filled up with summoned inner strength, thinking to blast the woman off him. Having been with him for 6 years, How could Qingyu not know the kid's temperament? Lifting her brows slightly, she held the woman's arm and pulled her off him as she said teasingly, "Little Vixen is full of lies. How can you still go hug the wrong guy if you had really not been able to eat of sleep thinking about me?" Although that woman was flamboyantly dressed up to the nines, but that face of hers was truly entrancing, her eyes filled with seductive temptation. With her chin held in Qingyu's hand, the woman's head was partially forced to look up. Not only was the woman unperplexed, two faint reddish plumes even rose up over the powder on her cheeks as she coquettishly mourned in playful protest and leaned in closer into Qingyu's embrace, saying, "How hateful! Who asked you not to catch me? Oh, so you're blaming it on me now? Then I will not dare to come again next time," Qingyu said with a helpless laugh. "Such a heart-stealing thief. You don't want to be responsible after winning me over," the woman said with her beautiful eyes gazing at her, putting on a look of mock indignant anger. Qingbei was shocked beyond words. Isn't the Gathering Cloud Loft just a rather famous little tea house in the capital? Why was there an independent space set up as a pleasure house, a brothel right in its backyard? It was overflowing bosoms, revealing cleavages and coquettish women preening seductively everywhere, with the lecherous patrons' faces all shining with lust. He just could not bear to look at it anymore. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What he found even harder to accept was the fact that Qingyu actually seemed to frequent this place quite a lot. As a girl, how could she flirt and tease another woman like there was nothing to it? Where are her morals? Qingbei suddenly found the bright and intelligent mind he had always prided himself on was now of not much use. Oh, what a handsome young man we have here. That is a fresh face. Is it your first time here to play? Several women who were idle at the side already had their eye fixed on Qingbei. With such an outstanding countenance and looking so innocent and ignorant, it made the bunch of women who were like a pack of hungry and salivating wolves feel their hearts start to itch unbearably, all about to pounce with their vicious claws. Where could Qingbei possibly have ever seen such a kind of battleground? And he could not even react to anything at that very moment. Forgetting how to even dodge, the woman's hands were about to caress his chest. How impudent! A languid and magnetic male voice wafted over slowly from a certain distance away. It was not loud, but it caused the atmosphere to suddenly turn strangely quiet. Chapter 4. 1. Playing outside calls for payback. Accompanying those two words that reached them was a highly expensive carved jade wine flask that struck with pinpoint accuracy right onto that audacious hand. The woman's face instantly turned pale, her whole arm turned numb. But she did not bother with the pain she was feeling, but instead fell straight to her knees onto the floor, not even daring to raise her head up as her entire body trembled visibly. Because the layout of the place was specially designed. Every single space in there was independent and sealed completely. Though they were separated only by a bead curtain, they would not be able to hear anything outside. It could be seen that the owner of the place had spent quite a bit of effort on the place. Outside was a bustle of indulgence in fine wine and boisterous revelry, with the glittering of gold and luxurious opulence seen all around, but on the inside, it made people feel as if they had fallen right into an ice cave, the chilling cold biting into their bones. Even the face of the woman who had been flirting with Qingyu earlier had changed in shade as she turned respectfully around, her eyes and head lowered down. The smile at the edges of Qingyu's mouth faded away a little, her eyes turning to look in the direction that the wine flask had been thrown from. Right at that moment, a gust of wind blew the curtain open, revealing a person inside who had his eyes half opened, deep violet eyes that were dark and sinisterly charming, so beautiful to look at, drawing countless people to want to get close to them like moths to a flame. That pair of eyes were just too beautiful, and at the same time so very terrifying, which made Qingyu still remember today the first words he had said. "You are the first person who dares to look at me like that." But she really wasn't in the mood to reminisce at that moment about the time they had first met, but was instead thinking why that fellow would appear here like a pesky spirit that could not be shaken off. Speaking of that, having been here in this strange world for so many years, she had never been fearful of anyone. Up till now, this man could be considered to be the first person that made her instinctively feel that he was not to be trifled with. As for how she had come to have crossed paths with him, it had stemmed from when she was concocting an antidote elixir for Qingbei, where she needed to acquire a very rare and precious herb, the polar fire core. According to what was depicted in the books, that was a species that was only the very verge of extinction, and this man happened to have it in his hands. All right, she would admit that her conduct was not all that acceptable when she took it without asking, but who asked that fella to be so obstinate, refusing to budge by force or persuasion? She had even suggested many conditions unfavorable to herself in exchange for it, and since he still refused, she had no choice but to take it by force. Qingyu, do you know this person? Qingbei beside her had naturally noticed something amiss, and he asked in a low voice. But just how sharp were that man's ears when his eyes immediately darkened by quite a bit? It's true. What you fear most will finally come haunt you. Back then, to show her sincerity, she had even taken the initiative to reveal her name to him, but had merely inverted the sequence, giving her name as Yu Qing. She had not really lied after all, as those words were still her name. The black-robed guard standing on both sides of him had been stewing for quite a while under the terrifying aura their lord was exuding. They knew immediately that their lord was not in that great a mood at that moment. There was another enchanting and beautiful-looking red-clothed man directly opposite the violet-eyed man, his stunningly dazzling peach blossom eyes with their long, luscious lashes bright and radiant, his face filled with a brilliant smile. "Kid, I haven't seen you for so long.
How are you?"
The youth was not unfamiliar to him. His portrait had been hanging on the wanted list for 2 whole years already, but no one had been able to locate him at all, like he had completely disappeared from the face of the earth. This was truly a case of wearing out a pair of iron shoes in search to no avail, but suddenly stumbling upon it without any effort needed. Such an audacious little brat, under the entire heavens, it was feared that only this little kid would dare to take advantage of a man like Lu Junyao. Chapter 4. 2. Playing outside calls for payback, before seeing you, I was doing rather well. Qingyu replied smilingly, her body automatically taking a step back, her hand holding Qingbei tightening as her eyes quickly surveyed the surroundings. Thinking to escape again? You won't be so lucky this time, Bai Ziyan said as the corners of his mouth curled up sinisterly. The polar fire core you stole was meant to be used by our lord to treat his injury, and if not for you, he would have fully recovered. If you cooperate and hand it over to us here today, your lord here might just consider allowing you to die with your body in one piece. Qingyu lifted up an eyebrow. You've got to be kidding. It's already been so long. The dregs of the herb has long turned into flower fertilizer. If you had asked me earlier, I might still have a few leaves left over. Polar fire core. Qingbei's eyes sank. Wasn't that the strange flower used for the treatment of his legs? He had been thinking how strange it was that the upper half of that flower had been scorching hot while its bottom half felt so bitingly cold. So that was actually the legendary polar fire core. What kind of a price had Qingyu paid to get her hands on something like that? And she was always saying that she wasn't the real Qingyu, and she would leave this place one fine day. If that was the case, then why was she risking her life to try to save him? Hearing the news that the polar fire core was gone, Bai Ziyan's alluring peach blossom eyes lost its smiling twinkle, to be replaced with chilling murder. You are damned. The polar fire core was something they had finally managed to retrieve after so much struggle, at the cost of several hundred lives of their men. They had thought to wait till it bloomed fully, where its medicinal effects would be better, but in the end, it was stolen from them by this kid here. The Lord did not have all that much time left, and if he was still not given the medicine, he would be tormented to death by that force in him that was both extremely fiery and chilly. They had searched for the flower-stealing thief throughout the entire world, and now it seemed that their efforts were for naught. They wouldn't feel any relief even if they killed the kid 100 times. Compared to Qingyu's calm composure, Qingbei's heart was a complex mix of feelings. With the thought that she had been drawn into such trouble because of him, he was filled with endless remorse and self-reproach. In fact, He had been burdening her so much all these years. No matter whether she was the real Qingyu, she had fulfilled more than any duty she might have towards him. He was just thinking to step forward to explain when Qingyu stretched her hand out to stop him, pulling him behind her. Qingbei was not all that tall at this moment, and Qingyu was a little more lanky. Standing together like this, it was seen that she was actually slightly taller than him. She stood in front of him, her stance highly protective. "Little Yen, your love has turned to hate, and you've set this trap for me to fall into? Women are truly frightening," Qingyu said with an indiscernible smile as she looked at the woman at the side whose head was still lowered. Lian Ji stared blankly for a moment before her brows furrowed up. She had not known that the Lord would come here today at all. It had been a few years since she had last seen the Lord, and even though this was completely unintentional, she must not speak recklessly here or she would escape disaster herself. There was only frustration in her heart at that moment. If she had known that the youth was the thief that had stolen the polar fire core, she would have delivered a chop of her hand on the back of his neck. "You person you want is me. This kid here does not know anything but just came here with me today. Let him go," Qingyu said, and then turned her body to the side to signal Qingbei with her eyes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But how could Qingbei possibly abandon her and run away on his own? They were twins, and they had come out from their mother's tummy one after the other with a cup of tea's time in between. She had come out first, and it was destined she was the elder sister that had to look after her younger brother. Regardless of what she was like in the past, but ever since she had saved him out from the fire, she had really changed. Intelligent, confident, brave, and possessed amazing godly skills in medicine. She had done every duty as an elder sister, protecting him and looking out for him. But she was after all still a girl, and he could not possibly always hide behind her. Chapter 5. 1. Life accompanying weapon spirit Qingbei did not obey her words, but to step out from behind her and said in a calm voice, "I was the one who ate the polar fire core. Whether you want to kill me or cut my flesh out, I will submit myself to the Lord." Qingyu has nothing to do with this matter at all. Beside him, Qingyu furrowed up her brows.
"You've gone mad."
She had spent so much effort before she managed to heal this sickly cripple, and in the end, he was actually doing this in return? "You have already done enough for me, and I cannot continue to burden you anymore." "What burden?
You are seeking your own death now."
With that puny-sized body of his, it wouldn't be enough to withstand even a single palm from those people. Seeing her with her brows knitted up together with her face filled with displeasure, Qingbei suddenly curled up the corners of his lips. He was a youth blessed with exquisite features, and he seldom showed much fluctuation in the way of his emotions. The smile that came out so suddenly, like the melting of a mountainous glacier, caused Qingyu to be startled.
"Qingyu,
you're always saying that you're not my sister, but you have always shielded me from all kinds of danger, every single time."
"Why?"
Qingbei's eyes lowered slightly, hiding the emotions showing in them. "Even if that's true, what does it matter at all? The only person who treats me well and protects me is only you." Just how sensitive the youth had been feeling all this time. He might have discovered that fact from the moment he had come out from that fire. But he did not want to shatter everything they shared. Even if it was not real, it was warm and comforting to him. Qingyu was seemingly still in shock and had not reacted when the youth who did not even reach her height suddenly pulled her to a corner and said, "This time, let me protect you." Since the trouble had started because of him, he should be the one stepping forward to resolve it. The thin figure seemed to have grown taller by quite a bit suddenly, filled with the bravery of one who did not care anymore, and the quiet air around his person grew chilling. This kid. It seems he had been hiding his light under a bushel. She had been blind. Qingyu arched up an eyebrow and did not feel that worried anymore, but just leaned back in the corner casually, seemingly unaware of the dangerous atmosphere in the air that could be ignited by a single spark. "Haha, you're finally willing to let that kid go out to take charge. I don't know why you're always shielding him all the time." A lazy-sounding voice that was slightly coarse, like having just awoken from a deep sleep, suddenly sounded in her mind. "You've woken up? That fella had slept for more than 2 months already. But with this time's awakening, from a young puerile toddler, he had turned into a well-built youth, with both his voice and body size changed by more than a bit. Yawn. I've awoken. What is happening here? Is it going to be a fight? Do you need help? Finally having adapted to the situation and gotten a clear look of the circumstances before his eyes, he was suddenly feeling rather excited for no reason, which also led Qingyu's emotions to alter as well. She immediately turned to give him an uninterested look. Don't stir up more trouble for me. Since you've woken up, stay in there and just continue with your cultivation. I do not want to have a useless piece of trash as my weapon spirit. Useless weapon spirit? Are you talking about me? Do you think that there is another piece of trash? If not for the fact that you have been dragging me down, I wouldn't have to be stuck in such an awkward place in my cultivation journey. Who knew what manner of things had become covetous towards you when you came over here with me that swallowed half of your soul? If not for the fact that the blood contract exists between us, I really would have liked to abandon you. Stop, stop, stop. Don't say anything more. I've realized my error. I'll go cultivate right this instant. But damn it, you are my mistress, and for your entire life, no. For every life you will live, you can only have me as your weapon spirit alone. So, not matter how much you despise me, you must still tolerate me. That voice seemed to have been quite badly stung. After the roaring explosion of angry words, not a single peep came out anymore. He must have gone to cultivate himself seriously. Chapter 5. 2. Life accompanying weapon spirit. Qingyu's lips curled up, but a ripple rose up in her heart. This fella, who had stayed inside her body since she was born, and after she died, he had actually followed her into this strange world. To her, that might be the one and only existence that she could never sever. But it was clear he could have left her, to go find a more powerful host. Mistress, we are already inseparable, and it is impossible for me to go find a new master. Hence, you are no longer just my master, but you're also the faith that I hold dear. You are the one who gave me life, allowing me to turn from an ice-cold weapon spirit into this form of flesh and blood. If I leave you, I will merely be a useless piece of metal that is absolutely worthless. After a weapon spirit remains long enough with people, they will actually start to develop human emotions. But why was it the one thing that hurt people the most were humans that were supposed to share blood ties? Qingyu clicked the corner of her mouth, fueled by the cold irony. A little brat who doesn't know death is upon him. Bai Ziyan looked down from his higher vantage point at the laughable scene before his eyes, his gaze contemptuous. Lianji, kill off that little brat and hand over the other one to me? To have dared to do something so audacious, she must suffer utmost torment, and to suffer a fate worse than death.
Yes.
The woman who had acted so coquettishly earlier had suddenly turned into a cold-blooded killer, one without emotion, and her face filled with malevolence. As just a lowly servant, and she already held powers that were not to be underestimated. This entire group of people were truly not to be trifled with. Qingyu swept her gaze over the two opponents in front of her. Seeing that little Bei did not possess the slight bit of combat experience, he would fall into disadvantage very quickly in battle, or even made to become a hostage used to hold as ransom. Regardless whether it was in her past life or this, Qingyu was always one who kept an extremely low profile. Clearly possessing sufficient power to show the world her arrogance with impunity, but she absolutely abhorred inviting trouble. When she was able to peacefully resolve a problem, she never liked things to come to blows. Hence, at the moment that Qingbei received a palm from the opponent and was about to have a sword driven through his chest, Qingyu gave a sigh. As everyone stood there tongue-tied with their eyes staring, Qingbei floated in to neutralize the powerful killing strike. Not only did she neutralize the strike, but even the famed 1,000-year-old sword in Lianji's hand forged with magical iron had a crack appear upon its surface. Lianji stood there stunned for a long while, the area at the web between her thumb and finger numb, sending a clear message to her. This youth possessed great power. Her weapon had already gained spirit consciousness, and compared to before, Regardless of her attack power or defense, they had both been greatly boosted. Even her body had strengthened to become impregnable, and many power opponents had succumbed under her blade. But this youth had actually injured her. It could be seen that he was to be feared. The violet eyes behind the curtain flashed briefly, a strange glint that was rarely seen. The enchanting red-clothed Bai Ji Yan was also astounded. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Lianji was an assassin among his subordinates who specialized in assassination, and she possessed unnatural gift. She had challenged people who were levels stronger than her before, and had never failed, but she had actually been defeated by such a pretty-looking youth who looked so completely harmless here today. Just where was he from? Bai Ji Yan wasn't really surprised when he thought back to the time a few years ago when this kid had stolen the Polar Fire Core. That's not right. The Polar Fire Core had always been grown inside the Lord's courtyard. In that place the Lord stayed in, besides the few trusted aides of his, any outsiders had absolutely no chance of coming out once they went in. Not to mention the countless kinds of traps and snares in there, but anyone who went within 100 meters of the Lord in there would not be able to remain unscathed. Chapter 6. 1. To entice or to throttle, how had he sneaked inside and escaped anyone's notice? And how had he then managed to come out without a scratch? Unless, as if to affirm his suspicions, the youth's mesmerizing upslanted phoenix-like eyes arched up a brow and said indifferently, "Isn't it all just about a bunch of herbs? You were going to use it to save a person, and it was the same thing for me. But since I am not able to deny my wrongdoing in this, I will cure your lord of his condition." Bai Ji Yan's heart then surged suddenly. For some unknown reason, he suddenly felt as if the youth would really be able to create some kind of miracle. But his face remained unmoved as he asked, "Based on what do you think that I am to believe you?" Heh. The ends of Qing Yu's mouth curled up with an almost imperceptible arc, her gaze seemingly looking into the pair of devilishly charming eyes through the curtain. "Based on the one fact that I am the only person who is able to touch you. Isn't that right?" The violet eyes immediately narrowed greatly. Others might not know, but he knew it clearly. Back when this youth had come to steal the flower, he had discovered it, and the two of them had exchanged blows. He had thought that since the flower thief was so obnoxious, he did not need to hold back. He would just let him suffer the agonizing torment of ice poison and fire poison as they wrecked at him till his death. But he did not die, but was still living. Thus, when he saw the youth here, he was astonished. Bai Ji Yan felt the rise of emotions within the man beside him, and he quickly realized that the words the youth spouted out were true. Beside shock, Bai Ji Yan was feeling more of delight instead. "If you are really able to cure my lord, then we will all owe you an immense debt of gratitude. But how confident are you?" "I will never say things that I am not confident of." Qing Yu's brows knitted as she turned to look at the color of the sky outside. If they are discovered to be outside the Duke's manor at this time of the day, they would surely be in more trouble. "I will find another chance to come here again. Crush this elixir in water and drink it. It will suppress your condition for a period." She placed a small, exquisite bottle onto the table at the side, and then turned to pull Qing Bei, who was still foolishly caught in a daze, to walk out. The women around them subconsciously parted to allow them a path out, not a single one among them daring to block their way. Bai Ji Yan stretched a hand out, and the porcelain bottle was sucked to fly through the air into his hand. He removed the stopper from the bottle and took a slight whiff. A glint of surprise was then immediately seen to flash in his peach blossom eyes. How could it? How? The low magnetic voice was tinted with a slight raspiness, but filled with a kind of alluring grace, just like his pair of mysterious and majestic-looking eyes. Bai Ji Yan shook his head, unable to hide the surprise in his expression. How could such a low-level world possibly have a person with such amazing skills in medicine? And he's still such a young youth at that. Even I am not all that confident that I will be able to cultivate an elixir like this. Bai Ji Yan had come from a highly prestigious and influential clan, and he received his tutelage from the Divine Doctor clan. He was the most talented disciple in his generation among the Divine Doctor clan, and in terms of skills in medicine, nobody had been able to surpass him, where even his revered teacher had nothing but praise for him. But now, he is actually admitting that he is not as good as a little kid here. It would seem like the kid must have come from some extraordinary background as well. At the very least, he couldn't possibly be from such a low-grade place like this place. But at that moment, he was not infuriated that someone was better than him, but went on to reveal a genuine smile on his face. Junyao, I have a feeling that this youth would definitely be able to cure you of this condition that has tormented you for so many years, and it's the time for us to use more help. It seems this lowly place has some crouching tigers and hidden dragons, and that youth has significant cultivation powers and great skills in medicine. If we are able to get him to come under us, he will surely become a great source of help to you. Chapter 6. 2. To entice or to throttle Lu Junyao narrowed his eyes and said expressionlessly, "That kid is a tough bone to chew on. We might not be able to win him over. If he refuses to work for us and turns to become an enemy to us in future, that will definitely be very troublesome." Bai Jian's eyes flashed with a chilling glint. "Before that happens, I will put an end to him myself." On the other side, where Yen Su and Yen Shichong had been summoned into the palace, before they had even stepped into the main palace hall, they were met with a man dressed in golden clothes of the palace, embroidered with a four-clawed dragon with fangs bared, his figure tall and slender, and his face gentle and handsome, his brows filled with the light of wisdom. This man was the current crown prince Xianyuan, the emperor's firstborn son, and also the son he loved and favored the most. "Respects to your highness." The Yen father and son halted in their steps and bowed at the waist in greeting, but found themselves being gently pulled up. "There's no need for such courteous ceremony. The Duke of Eternal Peace and General Yen should hurry up inside. My father is waiting for the two of you inside," Xianyuan said with a smile, and then went around them to walk far away from them. Xianyuan had always treated people with gentle courtesy. But that was all just an illusion. His real person was one who was highly apathetic inside, exactly the kind of person who is passionate on the outside and cold on the inside, deep and unfathomable, impossible to read. This was also what the Blue Wave's emperor admired the most. The Duke of Eternal Peace did not have time to think further about it, but went on to step inside the imperial audience hall. The Son of Heaven in the top seat was about 40 years of age, his countenance young and handsome. He was seated upon the dragon throne, and his face was dark as he read through the memorials written to the throne. "Your vassal and subordinate general pays our respects to your majesties." The Blue Wave Emperor's attention then returned back as he rubbed at his temples. "My beloved officials, please get up. Have a seat." "Thank you, your majesty." Yen Su got up and took a seat on a chair at the side. "For your majesty to summon your vassals so urgently into the palace, could it be something big has happened?" The Blue Wave Emperor sighed and handed the memorial he had been reading to a palace servant beside him. The palace servant immediately brought the memorial over to hand it over to Yen Su. Yen Su opened up the memorial. As one who usually did not reveal his emotions, when he saw the contents recorded upon the memorial, he could not help but be shocked. Through these years, the reason our Blue Wave Kingdom has been able to jump right up to the top among the three kingdoms is mainly due to the fact that the Water Edge Emperor has been sickly and frail. And it is also due to the fact that the Duke of Vast Ocean suffered a relapse of an old ailment and had fallen unconscious into long coma. But who would have thought that the Water Edge Emperor's health would suddenly miraculously improve, and I received a report from our spies that the Duke of Vast Oceans regained consciousness yesterday. The man who had fallen into a deep sleep for 7 years. It was thought that he would never awaken and continue to sleep. Who knew he would actually wake up? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This also meant that the Blue Wave Kingdom would once again face the crisis of having their people put in misery and suffering. Just thinking about it already made the Blue Wave Emperor break out in cold sweat. The terror of that man, the Duke of Vast Oceans, his fiendish fame had spread throughout the entire three kingdoms. A typical example of a fanatical and warlike maniac who was exceptionally cruel, his notoriety striking terror into people's hearts. Every place he walked, people backed away from him, where none dared to trifle with him. And it was because of his presence that the Water Edge Kingdom was the most powerful kingdom among the three. Your Majesty need not get too worried. The Water Edge Kingdom had not declared they were seeking a war, and the 10-year peace treaty we signed back then has not yet passed. So even with the Duke of Vast Ocean's notorious fame, they would not dare act wantonly. Yen Su spoke to reassure softly when he saw that the Blue Wave Emperor's face was creased up in worry. There's something my dear Duke isn't aware of. Your Emperor isn't worried about that, but that the Water Edge Kingdom sent word some time ago that they want to send a princess here to propose a royal matchmaking. At that time, the list of names for the princess escort had not been set, but looking at the current situation, it will almost definitely be that Duke of Vast Oceans himself that would be coming. And he could not help but feel trepidation in his heart. Chapter 7. 1. Elder brother bursting with righteousness, the youth who had merely been 16 years of age already sent chills running through people. Now that 7 years had passed, what kind of a terrifying stage would he have reached? The Blue Wave Emperor could only feel himself all knotted up inside at that moment, his brows knitting up so tightly it would be able to kill a fly. Yen Su did not give much of a reaction. After the initial surprise passed, his demeanor was thoughtfully confident. Your Majesty, although the Duke of Vast Oceans is indeed a troublesome and prickly entity, but I, Yen Su, am no mere pushover either. If that is not sufficient, Your Majesty must not forget that behind your vassal's daughter, Yen Ningluo, is the most powerful faint mist clan throughout the lands. Once those words came out, it miraculously appeased the anxiety and unease inside the Blue Wave Emperor, where he then could not help but to laugh at himself. I have really lost it right there. I had allowed the Duke of Vast Oceans to almost scare myself out of my wits. It seems I am really getting old. Your Majesty is just in your prime. Speaking of being old, isn't your vassal here another 2 years older here? Ha ha, Yen Su. Back when we sworn ourselves into brotherhood, we were just 2 ignorant little lads. In the blink of an eye, our children have now all grown up. Both of us have aged. With that bout of emotional outburst, he then came down from the dragon throne and patted Yen Su on the shoulder. Eat in the palace today. It's been a long time since we've sat down together to reminisce about old times. With your victorious return this time, you should rest yourself well for a period. With you around in our country, it really makes things so much easier for me. The Blue Emperor at that moment had dispensed with formal terms of address. In private, the two of them were still the closest of brothers. It could be said that Yen Su was beneath only one man and above all others in the Blue Wave Kingdom. The saying merit that surpasses the rain was never a worry that concerned the emperor. It might be because only the two of them themselves knew the kinds of tempestuous storms they had weathered through together, and that the bond between them would never change no matter how many years pass. Yen Su was made to remain in the palace, and Yen Shicheng went back to the duke's manor on his own. The heir has returned. On the battlefield, Yen Shicheng was a grim-faced, stalwart, and severely strict general. But stripped of his battle robes, he was an elegant, suave, and handsome young man in private. As the esteemed heir, he did not put on any airs, highly approachable, and everyone in the manor loves him exceptionally. Yen Shicheng stopped everyone from kneeling as they greeted him, and he went on to say with a smile, "Is the Duchess feeling fine? I want to go see her." A rather pretty little servant girl then bravely said in a crisp voice, "The Duchess has been in good spirits the past few days, and Her Highness had even gone to the temple to pray for the heir and His Highness." "Is that right?" Yen Shicheng then asked as his eyebrow lifted, the smile at the ends of his lips deepening a little. Glancing at the little servant girl, he then said, "Thanks a lot." He then walked past the others and went on his own towards the most luxurious abode among the women's quarters. As the Duchess of Eternal Peace had been slightly unwell the past few years, The place she lived in within the manor had exceptional views, and the air felt recuperative. Though quiet, there was no lack of opulence and luxury. Along the way there, one would definitely have to go past the most wretchedly worn little courtyard in the entire Duke's manor. The tranquil abode, the place the lady had stayed at. It was a short-lived marriage the Duke of Eternal Peace formed on one of his trips out. The lady had unfortunately died during childbirth from excessive loss of blood, but she had held on strongly enough to give birth to a set of twins of different sexes. Before Yan Shicheng turned 12, he had always been outside undergoing tough training in his cultivation. Upon reaching 12 years of age, he had followed his father to conquer the battlefield, hence he had never met this pair of younger siblings. As he thought about that, he began to grow curious. His footsteps turned around, and he went walking towards the tranquil abode. It was only when he came close to the place that he discovered that the courtyard was tiny and crudely simple, where even the quarters of higher-positioned servants in the manor was better than this place. Chapter 7. 2. The elder brother bursting with righteousness, Yan Shicheng's brows were furrowed up as he was thinking which impudent servant dared to be so harsh when the sound of light footsteps was heard from the inside. The doors then opened up from his knocking. Yan Shicheng was caught off guard, and he just stood there stunned. Qingyu had already sensed that someone was pacing outside the walls, but she had not thought that it was Yan Shicheng, and she could not help but find it laughable. This fellow must be feeling too idle that he would actually come patronize their tiny little courtyard. Although she already knew his identity, at that moment she had to put on an act. You are? Yan Shicheng was really tongue-tied with shock. This is his younger sister? Before this, he had once thought that the reason this sibling pair had been neglected for so many years might be because they were feeling inferior and were being timid, or they were feeling rebellious and refused to be taught. But the young girl before his eyes was seen to be highly graceful and beautifully confident, not inferior in any way to the daughters of other noble family in her demeanor. And the most important thing was, the girl's looks was actually so alluring? That's right. Really alluring. Charm made in heaven oozing out right from her bones, a pair of slightly up-slanted eyes like a phoenix swirling with a bright gleam. So beautiful, she seemed not from this world. The ends of her lips slightly raised up, a faint smile on them while dressed in a pure white dress. She should give people a feeling of a pure white lotus in clear water, but she somehow made people feel she was such a seductive beauty. Qingyu noticed that he still had not regained his wits, and the smile on her lips deepened. With that smile, Yan Shicheng felt something warm inside his nose, like something was going to flow out uncontrollably. He quickly gathered himself and turned his gaze away. This younger sister of his must not be underestimated. If they were to go on the battlefield, would there even be a need for a battle? Just bring her out there, and the enemies would surrender without a fight, as her damage power was really just too strong. Yan Shicheng thought rather evilly to himself in his heart. He finally regained his senses, and then laughed a little awkwardly. You are called Qingyu, right? I am your elder brother, Yan Shicheng. Big brother? Qingyu nodded, and called out in address courteously, her voice indescribably soft and enchanting. Yan Shicheng was slightly taken aback, and he coughed twice to conceal that moment of awkwardness before he said, I just came back, and I will say that this is the first time I am meeting you, as for so many years, I have seldom been back here. Oh right, where's Qingbei? His voice had just fallen when the sound of wheels rolling over the ground sounded from inside. A thin youth seated upon a wheelchair was coming out slowly as he pushed the wheelchair forward, his complexion pale with a pair of long slanted phoenix eyes that were magnificently exquisite, which had great likeness to those of the young girls. He smiled at Yan Shicheng and then said, Big brother, we've troubled you to come all the way here to see me and my elder sis. Your legs. Yan Shicheng's brows knitted up. How did they become like this? Although he did not know much about what went on in the manor, but he had never heard anyone mention that the other young master in the manor was crippled and unable to walk. And even if he had injured himself, why did the manor's physicians not treated him? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You just who would dare to show such careless disregard for his life. Yan Shicheng's face darkened. Qing Bei, did anyone do this to you? As the heir of the family, how could he possibly not be aware of the methods the womenfolk of the household were capable of? This young youth must have been crippled for quite a period already. The more he thought about it, the rage in him grew stronger. Just tell me who did this to you. You do not need to care no matter who that person is. Since I have come back, I will not allow this matter to be left answered for. They had actually dared to harm the young master of the Eternal Peace, Duke's Manor. I will definitely make them pay the price. What a show of indignant rage against injustice. But just how much of that was truly genuine? Chapter 8. 1. The truth is always cruel. Qing Bei was clearly rather greatly shocked by this elder brother he was meeting for the first time, and it was a good long while before he snapped back to his senses. Big brother, I am all right. Is it because you do not dare to say it? Yan Shicheng knitted up his brows. No worries, the affairs of the household have always been handled by mother. As she has not been well, the servants must have overlooked the matter.
I'll go ask mother about it right now.
Upon saying that, he immediately turned and wanted to walk out. Qing Yu suddenly laughed lightly and said, Actually, there are some matters one need not know too clearly about. Yan Shicheng's footsteps halted, and he then heard the voice tinged with laughter continue to say, The truth is often what you will not like to know about, and once the paper covering the window is poked open, one might be very disappointed.
What do you mean by that?
Qing Yu laughed and did not say anything more. The youth in the wheelchair hesitated for a long while before he opened his mouth slowly. Regarding this matter, the Duchess is aware of it. Or should it be said that she instigated it? My legs became like this because she did not allow the Manor's physicians to treat me, thereby missing the most critical period for treatment, causing me to be crippled. What did you say? Yan Shicheng's eyes were wide as he stared, his face filled with rage and incredulity. How could you say such seditious and treasonous words? In his eyes, mother was such a gentle and kind woman. Although father had reneged on his promise to marry only one woman, in her hurt, she had only made herself move to live in a tranquil and quiet courtyard as she continued to manage the manor's internal affairs. Hence, how could she be capable of committing such a vicious and cruel deed? Within this manor, if without the Duchess' consent, who does Big Brother think will be so bold and daring to plot to harm the only other male descendant besides Big Brother? Qing Bei said, the corners of his mouth curled up in a mocking smile, before turning his head away and refusing to say any more. Yan Shicheng's hands clenched up into fists and then relaxed, his face dark as he looked at the twins, before he went striding out with long, wide steps. I had not thought that the Eternal Peace Duke's Manor's heir would possess such a clean and simple personality, Qing Yu said teasingly, with her lips curled up at the ends. But if he really goes to question the Duchess right now and gets to know the truth, I think his state of mind might change quite a bit. Big Brother is usually not here in the manor most of the time and had not encountered the evil scheming minds of people much. It's only to be expected that he would be a little naive and simple. Qing Bei commented softly as he watched the departing back. And this little brat here is so wise, Qing Yu said with a laugh as she ruffled his hair. I can see that you seem to like him a lot. In the Duke's Manor, Big Brother can be considered to be the only person that's flesh and blood.
I
admire him very much, Qing Bei said, feeling a little embarrassed. From a very young age, Yan Shicheng had gone on to follow at the side of a wandering expert to practice cultivation, and it was thought that his level of cultivation must surely have reached unfathomable levels. And now he had gone on to do what all men strove to do, defending the country and killing their enemies on the battlefield. He was even made the youngest general in the entire Blue Wave Kingdom. Qing Yu could not help but laugh and then sighed lightly. Although soldiers are greatly respected, but they will be called in to face impending death anytime. I do not want you to have to face that and would rather you just live normally in peace. The peerlessly beautiful girl before him revealed a faint arc at the edges of her lips, her gaze filled with a rare moment of gentleness as she looked at him silently, which caused his heart that was calm to suddenly thump vigorously. They were clearly two people of the same age, but she was always acting a lot more mature and wise, making him feel like she had lived for a long time, who was able to see through people and things that happens, and there was nothing that could make her care all that much about anymore. Chapter 8. 2. The truth is always cruel. That moment's gentleness in her gaze made Qingbei feel that she did care for him, though he feared that that could very well just be his own illusion. Unconsciously, his hand stretched out to embrace her, his head leaning against her waist. "I'm sorry, big sister. I just blurted it out without thinking. Don't worry. I will live my life well. I will protect you." This was also his first time throughout the past 6 years he had called her big sister. From being initially suspicious, till she had faithfully protected him time and time again from the verge of death, it had already made Qingbei accept her wholeheartedly. Just like he had said before. No matter who she was and where she had come from. Once she became his elder sister for one day, she would forever be his elder sister. Good. The smile hanging from Qin Yu's lips deepened as her slender fingers gently ruffled the young boy's hair. The only source of warmth she felt in this strange world. She would carefully protect him as he grew up. "Big brother, what's wrong?" The soft and clear voice of a girl rang out to call back Yan Shicheng's consciousness that had drifted off somewhere. He smiled weakly and replied, "I'm sorry, little Ning. What were you just saying?" A mesmerizing little beauty in a jade green dress was seated opposite him, the pink flower on her forehead striking upon the cold and beautiful countenance, adding to its enchantment. This person was the top beauty of the Green Wave Kingdom, Yan Ningluo. Yan Ningluo's brows knitted up slightly. "Big brother has just come back from a victorious battle. Why do you still look like you have something on your mind? I have seen you looking rather distracted recently. Have you encountered some difficult problem? Can't you tell little Ning about it?" Yan Shicheng had not expected that his mood would come to affect his younger sister, and he was rather apologetic. "I had wanted to have a good chat with little Ning. Big brother is at fault here." This pair of siblings had also been apart more than being together from young. One was killing enemies on the battlefield, and the other was cultivating in seclusion in the Faint Mist clan. The time Yan Ningluo spent in the Duke's Manor every year was always very short, as there were many talented people in the Faint Mist clan. If she did not work hard, she would be squeezed out from the inner circle of direct disciples by others who were coveting a position in there. Being gifted was one thing, but diligence and hard work after that was important as well. Although the two of them were often not together, but as siblings from the same mother, their relationship was naturally very close. "Big brother has never shown your emotions so outwardly before. What has actually happened?" Yan Shicheng froze for a while, his thoughts drifting back to that particular day. He had not believed the words of Qin Yu and Qingbei, and he had gone to see the Duchess of Eternal Peace to ask for the truth of the entire matter. He had always felt that no matter how dark and scheming other manners of nobility were, he thought that the Eternal Peace Duke's manor was at least clean. But his mother's words that day had instead, "Little Chung, it's just a bastard child who isn't fit to be seen outside. Is it anything even worthy of you to come question me about? But that is my younger brother. You only have little Ning as a younger sister. Since when did you have a younger brother?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He could still remember his mother's eyes at that time. They had been so cold, like they were totally devoid of feelings. His legs. Did mother really silently consent to the women in the household to harm him? He no longer knew what kind of state of mind he had been in when he asked that question. But after that, his mother has smiled, her tone of voice chilly as she answered, "So what if I did? I do not care how many women your father wants to marry, but I care about how he could have really fallen in love with that woman back then. A woman that he had merely known for just a few short days. Where does that put me? I have been married to him for so many years, and he could actually forget his promise to me back then so easily." Chapter 9. 1. The Kingdom on the Water. Water Edge, I had originally thought that he married those women merely because he wanted to build and consolidate more power after weighing the pros and cons, and as long as he still has me in his heart, I can choose to ignore it all. But how could he fall in love with another woman? How could he allow that woman to give birth to his children? I hate him, and I hate that woman, and I absolutely detest those two bastards. That was the first time in his 20-over years that he saw such terrifying viciousness on the gentle and benevolent face of his mother. He had never thought that the day would come that he would see his mother become an aggrieved woman who secluded herself in her chambers. He had always thought that that was something that would happen only in the imperial palace. The gentle and kindly duchess in his mind, his mother who always had a smile on her face, had turned to become someone he felt he did not know. He could not accept it, and was unwilling to accept that to be the truth. Collecting his thoughts back together, he looked at the young girl before him whose face was filled with worry for him. His heart warmed up, and his large hand lightly caressed the young girl's face. Little Ning, big brother, really wish that you will never ever change, to never become blinded by the struggles for power, and to never need to change for any man to become a person that was not her at all. Thinking about that, Yan Shicheng then remembered that his intelligent and beautiful younger sister was engaged to the crown prince. Little Ning, have you and the crown prince recently met up at all? Him?
Nope.
Yan Ningluo's lips stiffened, her face looking like she could not be bothered about that. This couple who carried the bond of marriage between them did not seem to be showing any awareness of their engagement to each other. They were both direct disciples in the inner circle within the Faint Mist sect, but the Crown Prince Xianyuan Che was accepted 2 years earlier and was Yan Ningluo's senior. When they were back among the sect, their heads were always lowered when they encountered each other. With that being the case, Yan Ningluo did not have any feelings towards this fiancé of hers, and Xianyuan Che was also always cold and distant towards her, treating her very much like he would a stranger. The two people were tied together by the imperial family the moment they were born, and they just could not see eye to eye with each other. Yan Shicheng was also feeling rather puzzled. Although this younger sister of hers was proud and aloof, but she was usually still quite well liked by people. A girl with such a countenance and gifted like her, not to mention here in the Green Wave Kingdom, it was considered rare to see even throughout the entire lands. But the Crown Prince did not seem the least bit interested in her at all. It must be known that in the whole Green Wave Kingdom, there was almost no man who would not come to like Little Ning. Could it be? The Crown Prince likes men? Yan Shicheng's eyes bulged wide, shocked by the very thought that came into his mind before quickly pushing that strange thought away. Seeing his sister sitting there with her chin casually cradled in her hand, her beautiful eyes half narrowed as she looked outside the window, Yan Shicheng could not help but to sigh. Little Ning, what are you thinking? You really do not like His Highness the Crown Prince? Why would I like him? I do not even know him. Yan Ningluo looked at him lazily, her expression seeming to say, "You're really very strange. Both of you are in the same sect, and direct fellow disciples as well. How could you possibly not know him? Doesn't Big Brother know how strict and stringent the Faint Mist sect is with their segregation of levels? For someone like me who has been accepted into the sect merely 3 years ago, and just barely be considered to possess some gift, would have no chance of associating with core disciples like the Crown Prince who had been part of the sect for 7-8 years. Yan Shicheng did not say anything. Little sister, you've become naughty. That is obviously just an excuse. Your potential wouldn't be considered to be all that bad. Which other female are there with great potential like you? Even if you don't want to see the Crown Prince, you shouldn't come up with such a shoddy excuse, right? You're making Big Brother think you're an idiot, you know? Yan Shicheng was really worrying his heart to bits for this younger sister of his who was not interested in anything else but cultivation. Chapter 9. 2. The Kingdom on the Water. Water Edge, His Highness the Crown Prince is a dragon among men. No matter whether it's in terms of looks or knowledge, and also that deep and profound cultivation of his, he's more than worthy to be a match for you. Even Big Brother is sadly not as great as him. Little Ning, why do you just not like him? Yan Shicheng continued to persuade like an old grandmother, You are set to become the Crown Prince's imperial consort, and you have at most 2 years before you will have to go reside in the Imperial Eastern Palace. With the relationship between you two in such a bad state, you will surely be left in neglect by the Crown Prince. Yan Ningluo burst out laughing. Who cares for the position of imperial consort? Little Ning. Yan Shiqing stared with his eyes wide. You can't just blurt out such words so carelessly. If someone with ill intentions heard them, you'll be in trouble. I know, Big Brother is such a nag. Yan Ningluo arched her lips up, giving him a sweet and obedient look, like she had really heard everything that he had said. It was only then that Yan Shiqing finally let up. The peerless beauty that could bring down a city then turned her head to look far into the distance, her beautiful lips turned up in a faint arc, looking exceptionally ravishing. That's right, who cared about the position of imperial consort? Her whole heart had already been lost to that person. Only he was able to make her heart thump wildly, and only him. Different from the Green Wave Kingdom's high plateaus and wide plains, the Water Edge Kingdom was located at the north of the lands, surrounded by water, a true city in the sea. Due to its geography, the people of the Water Edge Kingdom had fair skin, like people imbued with the qualities of water, exquisitely beautiful. In terms of beauty, it was definitely the 9th Princess Wuxia Yan who was most outstanding, having inherited the Empress' beautiful pair of sapphire blue eyes, her every movement spiritually entrancing. When speaking of the most beautiful among people, only the Green Wave Kingdom's Eternal Peace Duke Manners Yan Ningluo and the Water Edge's Wuxia Yan stood out exceptionally, their fame as a great beauty spread throughout the lands and known by everyone. Among these two, one was proudly cold like a mystical being of the 9 heavens, the other mischievous and adorable like a water sprite, each with their own merits. And the people of the Water Edge Kingdom knew magic. This was not just some baseless rumor. People from this place possessed the ability to manipulate water the moment they were born. It was said in legends from long ago that before the lands were split into different kingdoms, this place was just a mysterious little tribe with amazing abilities who caused many people to turn a covetous eye upon them. But as if bewitched, no one could enter the place. A place that was clearly within reach, but seemed to be forever isolated from outside by a barrier of seawater. It was rumored that this place did not allow anyone with evil intentions to enter, and anyone who wished to go inside had to first receive the Lord's approval. Anyone who tried to barge their way in would suffer punishment from the god of the sea, to be swallowed up without mercy. There were people who refused to believe, and they went on to barge their way in. In just a few breaths, they found themselves engulfed by the roiling waves of the sea, with no way out. These lessons happened time and time again, driving fear into the hearts of potential intruders, and they did not dare to attempt going in there anymore. A place protected by the god of the sea. Mortals who sought to challenge that was as good as striking a rock with an egg. After that, the land split into pieces, and powerful pugilists from various places all sought to reign over their domains, founding kingdoms. But not a single person dared to set their sight upon this domain in the sea. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu, the leader who controlled those waters, then led his people to establish a kingdom upon the sea, calling themselves Water Edge. That was the Water Edge Kingdom's founding emperor and was the Imperial Yu family's ancestor. His reign lasted 30 years before he passed the throne down to his descendant and went on to roam through the lands. It was said that he was a powerful pugilist who had attained the Void Realm then, and he had already gone to a stronger world. The current reign was the Water Edge Kingdom's 17th emperor named Yu Mucheng. About 27 or 28 years of age, born destined to be an emperor, a pity. He was born with a frail and sickly body. Chapter 10. 1. Flare-up, cough, cough, cough. In the quiet imperial study, the sound of a series of stifled coughing broke out suddenly. Your Majesty, your dragon's body is more important. Have a rest first. A young man who was a close aide in waiting said with a worried expression on her face. The Water Edge Kingdom was different from other kingdoms. They did not have eunuchs here, as the founding ancestor had abolished that cruel and immoral system of castration. They only had palace maids and close aides in waiting who took charge of caring for the reigning emperor's daily needs, and their battle skills were also top-notch, carrying the responsibility of protecting him as well. Behind the dragon table, a man covered his mouth as he coughed violently before he slowly raised his head up from the memorials laid out before him. It was seen that it was a man with striking sharp brows and a pair of bright eyes, his face smooth as crowning jade. His facial features were gentle and elegant, but his complexion was unfortunately rather pale, where it could immediately be seen that he was not all that well. "I'm all right. How is the Duke of Vast Oceans doing recently?" Yumuchen asked in a soft voice with a slight lift of the ends of his mouth. The close aide replied respectfully, "The Duke of Vast Oceans awoke a few days ago." The imperial physician had gone to make a diagnosis and found everything to be normal. Moreover, over the several years that he had been in a deep sleep, the Duke of Vast Ocean's body had actually continued to carry out cultivation on its own. According to the imperial physician's report, it had been because the Duke's body was undergoing a breakthrough, and it could not contain that overwhelming power which caused the Duke to fall into a deep sleep to allow his body to adjust. That's what actually happened. The smile on Yumuchen's mouth deepened. "Looks like the heavens are blessing our water-edge kingdom. The Duke of Vast Oceans is the best gift the heavens have bestowed onto our kingdom." A strange phenomenon had occurred in the heavens 12 years ago where a star had descended from the sky, and he was now their guardian protector. "Your Majesty, with the 9th Princess delegation going to the Blue Wave, are you really intending to make her marry that crown prince of theirs?" The close aide gave voice to the question that had been in his heart for so long. He had served His Majesty for several years already, and their relationship was naturally not all that ordinary. Moreover, when in private, His Majesty was a very easygoing person.
Haha.
With that wild lass Yen Yen, if I really ignore her wishes and marry her off, she will definitely come tear down this imperial study of mine. Yumuchen's eyes were highly doting. "I fear that it's only because she saw that the Duke of Vast Oceans had awoken and feeling that she is strong backing now, she just wants to go to the Blue Wave Kingdom to cause a stir." Upon hearing that, the close aide then breathed out in relief. The 9th princess was the darling of the entire Water Edge Kingdom, and if she was really married off to the Blue Wave Kingdom, it was wondered how many men and women would be washing their faces with tears every day. The cloud-gathering loft was established by Ji and back when he was idle and had nothing to do. After he came to serve under Lu Junyao, the running of the establishment was handed over to Lian Ji. Having had to come back to this place after so many years was not a matter of choice. "Get out!" A shout of suppressed rage shot out from inside one of the sealed rooms, and a red figure flew out from the room before crashing heavily onto the wall. "My lord!" Today was a special occasion, and hence Lian Ji closed the place early. She was keeping watch when she saw her master thrown right out of the room, and she went to help him up with her face creased with worry. Cough, cough. Bai Jian clutched at his chest and coughed twice as he swept Lian Ji's hand away before approaching the room a little once more. "My lord, let me help you take a look. I will be fine. Are you wishing for death?" The voice of the man inside was threatening and cold. Lu Junyao's body that was afflicted with fire and ice poison was inherited from his mother back when she was injured in an ambush, while she was pregnant with him. And it was no ordinary fire and ice poison but also cast with the blood curse incantation. Every time it relapsed, the blood curse's seal would spread over his entire body, half of it red, and the other half a dark blue, making him look as terrifying as an evil demon. Chapter 10. 2. Flare up at moments like this. If one could not brace himself to get through it with strong willpower, the body's blood vessels would rupture, and he would undergo insufferable torment, but not die. The terrifying thing about this poison was that the torture would go on for a period of 49 days. For Bai Jian to go in there now would undoubtedly mean seeking his own death, as once the poison flared up, Lu Junyao would not recognize anyone and would just kill Bai Jian without mercy. Added to the fact that he had just been struck till he came flying out, and he had vomited out blood that surged inside him. That bloody scent would only agitate Lu Junyao and drive him berserk. "My lord!" Bai Jian called out as he heard the suppressed roars of pain, as he grew frantic. His good-looking face was filled with resentment and remorse, blaming himself for his own lack of skills, helpless before the fire and ice poison as he could do nothing but watch his lord suffer such torment. In his anxiety, he wanted to just rush inside in wild abandon, but Lianji held on tightly to him as she said, "Master, you cannot go in there. You will die. Let go. Lianji cannot allow you to send yourself to your death. Insolence. You dare defy me. Let go of me now." Through their struggles, something dropped out, and the sound of a ting was heard, causing the two of them to freeze. Bai Jian lowered his eyes to look and saw the exquisite little bottle that youth had left behind. He bent down to pick it up, and he gripped the bottle tightly for a long while. At this moment, he could only risk it and give this a try. "My lord, try this." Bai Jian did not go inside. He knew that Lu Junyao would not want anyone to see him in his current state, and hence he only a slight gap in the curtain to push the bottle inside. It was pitch dark inside the room, and nothing could be seen clearly. But in one corner, something seemed to be giving out a faint glow. The pair of violet eyes were exceptionally bright in the darkness, and he was born to be able to see in the dark. A small white porcelain bottle was sitting there by the door all alone. He stood up slowly, and right beside his violet eyes, a dense web of blood-colored vein lines crawled over his entire face, making him look like a demon straight from hell. He reached out a large hand and sucked the bottle right into his palm. There was a green round pill inside the bottle that was giving out a soft, lustrous glow. Without the slightest hesitation, he immediately swallowed the pill. The fire and ice in his body were still violently fighting to establish their own domains, neither giving way at all. The excruciating pain he felt then seemed to suddenly settle the moment he swallowed the pill. The icy chill and searing heat was no longer felt in a few breaths' time, like they had fallen into a deep sleep. The frightening vein lines on his face had also miraculously began to turn fainter and fainter, till it completely faded away. There was a mirror in the room, but it had already been shattered to pieces. Even the powerful Lu Junyao could not bear to face his demonic berserk self. He stood there quietly in his spot. After a long while, he picked up a fragment of the broken mirror, and his violet eyes then slowly turned to look into it. Nothing. There was nothing at all. That handsome face that was resented by the heavens and mortals alike was clear and flawless. He reached his hand up to feel his face. Was he hallucinating? It was as if nothing had appeared before. But he had clearly seen himself covered with weaving blood vein lines, and he had not even dared to look at his own face directly after that. As time passed, he was almost going to forget his own looks. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Within that dark and tiny little space, the man's violet eyes flashed unsurpassably bright as his spirit soared, his thin, luscious lips slowly lifting up at the corners into a beautiful smile. Bai Jian waited outside anxiously for a long while, his brows furrowed up tightly as he paced back and forth incessantly. Suddenly, the door was being opened. Bai Jian immediately stopped and turned himself around to look, where his eyes then widened incredulously in disbelief. Chapter 11. 1. Stir trouble. The Lord actually looked no different from his normal self. Whenever the poison relapsed, it would be at least a good part of the day before it would settle down, but today, in just a short 2 hours, Lu Junyao did not pay any attention to Bai Jian's expression, who looked like he had just seen a ghost, as his devilishly charming violet eyes shone with an exceptional sparkle. Go check what kind of an identity that kid has. Even the divine healer tribe's successor had been completely helpless, but that little youth who looked to be only about 10 years old had actually suppressed his demonic poison with just a single elixir. A person of such capability, even in the heavens among the clouds, would be a great target for any force on all sides to seek to rope in. After all, In this world where might made right, the status an alchemist enjoyed was usually greater than many of the prominent families and large sections. High up among the clouds, the divine healers reigned supreme, and in this generation, the successor to the divine healer sect by Ji Yan was worshipped like a deity. But that youth's skills in medicine was clearly quite a lot more brilliant than Bai Jiyan. This youth must be made one of his people, no matter what price he had to pay. Bai Jiyan could see his lord's strong determination, and he sighed as he said, "I understand." This was the first time he saw his lord showing such great interest towards a person, and it was feared when the lad was successfully roped in. This successor to the divine healer sect would surely lose the favor of the lord. Just thinking about it, and his future suddenly seemed bleak. After Yan Su came back from the imperial palace, the people in the manor had naturally jumped into another bout of activity again. In the Eternal Peace Duke's manor, besides the Duchess, there were 2 other royal concubines and 4 ladies who had not seen their husband for a long time. Every one of them had naturally carefully dolled themselves up. The Duchess had birthed a son and a daughter, Yan Shicheng and Yan Ningluo, both highly gifted and well-favored. Even though her relationship with Yan Su had not been as harmonious as before for many years, these 2 children of hers had gained for her a good amount of face. As for the royal concubines and the ladies, they had all given birth to only daughters. Although their looks were not like Yan Ningluo's that could bring cities down to their knees, they still possessed delicate and refined features. As Yan Su and his several wives all possessed rather outstanding looks after all, the children they gave birth to would naturally not be all that bad-looking. Tranquil abode, no matter how bustling the atmosphere was outside, the people inside the room felt almost none of it. The handsome-looking youth was meditating with his eyes closed, as a rush of power swirled around him, preventing other people from coming close. The light patter of feet suddenly sounded outside the door. The youth's ear moved slightly, and his eyes openly sharply. A strong surge of power then shot menacingly towards the door that had opened halfway. "If your sister's herb garden is destroyed, I'll get Little Snow to sleep with you tonight." A gentle, mirthful female voice came in, soft and harmless sounding, but it caused the youth to jump in fright. Little Snow was a 1,000-year-old ice toad, and the thing it loved most was poison. Especially when it had stayed at Qingyu's side for so many years and had been fed with poison, it was now the most poisonous among poisons. The poisonous toxins that had crippled his legs back then had actually been sucked out by Little Snow daily bit by bit. What others saw as terrifying poisons and such was the most delicious food there was in the eyes of that fella. But to Qingbei that was not the point. The point was that that fella was really just too disgusting. Just thinking about it, and Qingbei's stomach was turning, and his face turned pale. He had a serious obsession with cleanliness, and back in the period when his legs were being treated, he had not been able to eat at all for a good 2 weeks. Qingyu pushed the door and came in, to immediately see that constipated look on his face. She could not bear to tease him further, and she said, "All right, I was just teasing. I don't know where Little Snow has run off to play. You will not see it around for a while." Hearing that, his heart that had been suspended then finally settled down. Chapter 11. 2. Stir trouble you've broken through? Not bad. Qingyu could already feel that the lad's aura had become stronger from outside. He was actually quite a good seed in terms of cultivation, but it was unfortunate that he had been poisoned for those several years which held him back at that most optimal period. But Qingbei did not seem to be happy in the slightest, as his eyes lowered down to stare at his palms. Shaking his head, he then said, "It's not enough. I am still too weak." "Huh? Too weak?" Qingyu asked with an eyebrow lifted. "Don't be greedy. With cultivation, one has to progress steadily. When one is too eager for success, they often lose more than they gain." "That's not what I mean." "Then what?" "Like just now, I was not able to touch even a corner of your clothes." Qingbei's eyes dimmed. Being so weak, he would not even be able to defend himself, so how is he going to protect his big sister? Pack. He received a sharp rap on the head, and Qingbei was immediately stunned for a moment. He raised his head up to see the girl before him staring at him with her enchanting pair of phoenix-like eyes, her face in a sneer. You brat, how many years have I lived already? If I can be injured by you so easily, how embarrassing would it be for me? Seeing him lower down his head and not saying anything, Qingyu then softened her tone and said, "The things you are cultivating were what I handed down to you, through a more refined method than what is practiced in these lands. You have cultivated only for a mere 2 years, and you can already be considered to be a medium-grade expert, peerless among your level. In time to come, you will definitely become stronger." She would have to take it slow and not hit him hard. Otherwise, what was she going to do if the kid was unable to rise after taking a stumble? Hearing those words, Qingbei's mood improved quite a bit. His eyes filled up with resolve as he said, "I will definitely become strong." I believe you." Qingyu smiled and then ruffled his head. "TSK, I just can't believe that such a wretched place exists here in our manor. People who do not know might wonder which beggar is staying in here." The voice had reached before the person. Qingyu's ears were sharp. Those people were not all that far away, criticizing as they came closer in a group of about 3 or 4. But this place of hers, though could be said to be crude and simple, it was nevertheless meticulously taken care of, and there was even a beautiful well-tended herb garden in the yard outside, where to the eyes of any regular person would just be a bunch of regular plants and flowers. A place a beggar lived in? Wasn't that a bit of an exaggeration? Third sis, that just shows you know nothing. This place is where a unfavored concubine of father's lived in back then, and the fact that her 2 wild seeds are able to have a place to shelter them now is merely due to father's mercy. A girl said with a laugh, her words more venomous than the previous one. Damn it. Qingbei's gaze immediately turned cold as he came down from the bed, reaching the door with just a few steps, thinking of going outside to teach a lesson to those women who did not know what's good for them. Qingyu stood leaning against the side of the door as she stretched a hand out lazily to block him. Throwing him a glance, she said, "Go sit back down now. Squabbling with women, don't you feel cheap? Their mouths stink. Am I expected to just tolerate it?" Qingbei was filled with disbelief. She could remain so calm in this situation? This was totally unlike her usual self, who avenged the slightest aggrievement. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, that's right. Having been together for so many years, Qingbei had more or less come to understand his elder sister's character. A personality indifferent as still water, never initiating trouble as that was what she hated the most, keeping such a low profile that people could even forget she existed. But she was also one who bore grudges very much. No matter who, if they dared to come antagonize her, it might not be so bad if she was in a good mood. If they caught her on a bad day, then they would really be in for it. Chapter 12. 1. Charisma that overwhelms both males and females. Hence, at that moment Qingbei became a whole lot less bothered as he obediently retreated back inside. After calming down, he then remembered that he was supposed to still be a cripple at that moment. For him to be seen to have come down from his bed and walk would surely frighten people half to death. A distance away, 2 young girls of rather similar age came walking over casually. One of them was wearing a pink bustier dress of soft sheer silk, petite-sized with sweet looks. The other one was in full coral blue, wearing an elegant long flowy dress, her figure taller and with pretty delicate features. They were the daughters of the 2 other imperial concubines, the second young Miss Yan Shiwu and the third young Miss Yan Shiro. Yan Ningluo seldom came back from the faint mist sect, and these 2 people had then seen the place as a mountain without a tiger, hence the monkeys proclaimed themselves as king, used to being domineering and having things their way, where the younger sisters below them did not dare to go against them at all. Even Qingyu and Qingbei had not been spared from their bullying when they were younger. But after the time that Qingyu secretly taught them a good lesson, the sisters had stopped for a long period and had not come out to ride roughshod over them. The one wearing the pink silk dress was Yan Shiro. She looked at the tranquil abode's tightly shut doors and said, "In the light of day, and their doors are shut so tightly. Could those 2 wild, illegitimate siblings possibly be?" Ha ha ha. Be committing some shameful deed in there? When she said that, she could not help but reveal a wicked smile on her face. She tiptoed sneakily over, thinking to push the doors open hard to give the people inside a scare. Who knew that when she had just leaned herself against the door and was about to exert her strength to push, the doors were suddenly opened. With her weight placed upon the doors and the suddenness of the opening of the doors, Yanshirua could not pull herself back in time and fell heavily forward. A splat sounded, exceptionally loud. In a show of a great lack of image, she lay there splayed flat upon the floor, her dress completely lifted up over her head. The clean white pair of boots in front of her face retreated back a few steps as if shocked, where an astonished voice then sounded from over her head. Why is Elder Sis doing this for? Why do you need to fully prostrate yourself so obsequiously before me?
Puffed.
In order to avoid trouble, Qingbei was at that moment hidden behind the screen. Although separated from outside, he could still see the scene happening clearly. His big sister is just too black-bellied. Third sis. Yanshi-Wu then regained her senses as she recovered from her shock, quickly running with small steps over to help Yanshiro up. Are you all right? Yanshiro had fallen quite heavily, and her hair had become a frightful mess, where there was even a greenish bruise on her forehead. Her face was all covered in dust, dirty all over, and looking no different from a crazed woman at that moment. Yanshiwu could not help herself, but to feel a little disdainful. But as they were on the same boat, she couldn't just strike her sister when she was down. Yanshiro did not need to look in a mirror to know how wretched she must look at that moment. She clenched her fists tightly and gritted her teeth as she stared viciously at the young girl before her.
Yanqingyu.
Her words suddenly could not come out. Yanshiro was stunned in her spot. This person is Yanqingyu. That gutless tortoise who is timid as a mouse? When had she become so beautiful? Wearing a simple and plain white dress, her lip-long hair not heavily adorned but just loosely held by a single hairpin with light strands fluttering slightly in the breeze, looking rather apathetic, but there was an indescribable feeling of languid casualness exuding from her, like she had been born with it. What infuriated her further was that the little girl who had been so skinny and ordinary-looking before could actually grow up to become so beautiful. That pair of long, upslanted phoenix-like eyes were so alluring, like those of a seductive fox spirit, her facial features unbelievably beautiful. She was practically comparable to Yan Ningluo. And who was Yan Ningluo? Chapter 12. 2. Charisma that overwhelms both males and females. What infuriated her further was that the little girl who had been so skinny and ordinary-looking before could actually grow up to become so beautiful. That pair of long, upslanted phoenix-like eyes were so alluring, like those of a seductive fox spirit, her facial features unbelievably beautiful. She was practically comparable to Yan Ningluo. And who was Yan Ningluo? That was the Green Kingdom's wave-topmost beauty, the strongest person among all women. An existence one yearned but could never reach, one they could only revere and worship, as it would never be attainable for them all. But this little bastard child, what right does she have to be more beautiful than them? The more she thought about it, the more imbalanced she felt in her heart. Yanshirua was almost going mad. The usual sense of superiority she always felt could not be found at all before Qingyu, as just that face alone was adequate to make her feel envy, jealousy, and hatred. Looking at Yanshiwu beside her, it was obvious that she was also mesmerized into a daze as she stared at Qingyu's face. Qingyu looked at the two women's foolishly dazed faces, and she could not help but smile. She touched her face lightly with a hand, and with her gaze highly mesmerizing, she asked, Pretty? Yanshiro nodded, although she hated to admit it. Suddenly realizing what she had just said, the expression on her face immediately changed, looking angry and embarrassed at the same time. What did you use to become so beautiful? Yanshiro was not all that scheming, but just too spoilt and bossy, a domineering bully. Besides loving to bully the weak and a little foul-mouthed, she hadn't really done anything too wicked. Yan Shiwu was instead a bit more intelligent. She had not said a word right from the start, but just observed everything silently. About that, Qingyu narrowed her eyes and gave a light laugh, a finger rubbing her chin, seemingly deep in thought. Just as Yan Shiro was filled with endless anticipation and Yan Shiwu was quietly observing her, Qingyu then parted her lips slightly and softly made this statement. It should be due to heaven's endowment, which is impossible for me to discard, I guess. Yan Shiro. Yan Shiwu. You're toying with me. Yan Shiro's pretty face was red with anger. Her trembling finger pointed at Qingyu, which suddenly found itself held in a grip. The younger girl's hand felt slightly cold, so soft and svelte, the joints of the fingers long and slender. So fair was the skin it was almost translucent, so beautifully smooth it almost looked like it was carved from jade. Just as Yan Shiro's attention was completely drawn in by that hand, her hand suddenly felt an incredibly smooth face under her fingers. Have a feel if you don't believe me. See whether there's anything on my face. The enchantingly beautiful girl then winked at her mischievously. As expected, Yan Shiro suddenly felt a tightening of her heart, and her cheeks began to show a visible red rush rising. Her breathing quickened, but her hand could not bear to shift away from that face. Yan Qingyu. This lass is pure poison. Yan Shiro pulled her hand back almost immediately as she shot Qingyu an angry and humiliated glance. Her face was still burning red as she quickly ran away like a thief. Yan Shiwu was completely stunned by the scene before her. What has happened here? Haven't they agreed to come teach the little bastards a lesson? Why had third sis run away? Third sis doesn't seem to like me too much. Qingyu's brows furrowed up, looking rather mournful. Her eyes dimmed, her desolate look causing Yan Shiwu's heart to wince. That was just her embarrassed. Before she even finished, Yan Shiwu almost bit her own tongue off. Just what had possessed her to say that? When she saw Yan Qingyu looking so sad, she had actually started to feel pity. What the hell? Yan Shiwu were wide as she stared, thinking that there must be something wrong with her somewhere. She did not dare to tarry on there any longer and quickly lifted her skirt up to leave from there. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Bwahahaha. The youth hiding behind the screen could not hold it in anymore, and he burst out in a Greta bout of laughter, the corners of his eyes tearing up. Is it that funny? Qingyu rolled her eyes at him. Qingbei was still laughing as he nodded his head. To think that you will employ the beauty stratagem. How despicable. Chapter 13. 1. Furor at the apothecaries. What's so despicable about that? As long as it works. Qingyu shrugged her shoulders. Moreover, although the two of them are a little arrogant and domineering, they are not truly that venomous at heart, so I can't really be bothered to deal with them seriously. It's good enough to just scare them off. Qingbei's gaze then unconsciously softened. He had seen his elder sister when she had killed without mercy. But this young lady here was actually gentle and kind-hearted deep in her bones, harboring a benevolent heart inside. Being like that, she had actually unconsciously drawn the eyes of many. Sis, they had come just to jeer at us. By this time, father would have come back from the palace, and there would be a welcoming feast in the manor. And we... As Qingbei spoke, his voice grew softer. Children of lady concubines are not entitled to attend it. Without a doubt, a sharp rap was delivered right onto the top of his head, and the youth cried out softly from the pain. The thing you need to do now is to cultivate and become stronger. Instead of thinking of attending the welcoming banquet, why not spend that time cultivating instead? When the time comes and you can stand tall to shine, who wouldn't be scrambling to come try win your favor? Would you then still lack this cheap father of yours at that time? Qingyu did not like seeing him show such an expression. Longing for the care and concern of kinship, longing for just one charitable gaze from that so-called father. What's kinship? Before money and benefits, everything could be betrayed. Again, That look in her eyes that seemed to care about nothing. Having been together for 6 years, he would often see these eyes on Qingyu that looked like they could pierce into people. Icy cold, apathetic. Like nothing before that pair of beautiful eyes was worth her time. She must have been hurt very deeply before. Qingbei bit his lip and held her hand. I'm sorry, sis. I've said that I will not make you angry again. I've broken my promise. I am not angry. Qingyu shook her head. But it's just that I do not want to see you looking so sad and feeling so inferior of yourself. I had thought that you had woken up to your senses in that big fire and decided henceforth that the only person you could trust is just me. Little Bei, you are highly outstanding, and there is no need for you to engage in self-pity. The day will come where Yen Su will regret he neglected such a brilliant son. I will definitely become strong. I will make you proud. Qingbei suddenly proclaimed solemnly, the expression on his face serious. He wanted to see Qingyu smile, a smile that came right from her heart. I believe you will. The young lady's eyes were gentle, the ends of her lips slightly lifted. A sliver of sunlight spilled upon the pretty face that was enchanting as a fox, like it was bathed in saintly brilliance, blindingly enchanting. Even a strong-hearted youth like Qingbei could not help but unconsciously felt his heart feel a moment of bedazzlement. His big sister was really just so beautiful. No wonder those two women had turned so red and went running away frantically. Qingbei then went on to continue cultivating. To not let anyone come disturb him, Qingyu then set up a barrier around him till the yard outside. Getting interrupted while immersed in cultivation might drive one to fall into devilry, and she would not want the little kid she had looked after for so many years to be destroyed just like that. And she also had more important things to deal with now as well. The 7-day deadline had passed, and she had not forgotten that she still had to go pay back a debt. Counting the days. The effects of that elixir was about to run out. She gave a helpless sigh. In these times, one can owe people any number of things, but just not a debt like this. With just one look, and it could be seen that those two men were no ordinary people. Even though she had lived for so many years, she was not entirely confident she could deal with them. So, she had better play it safe. Troublesome things like this. She hated it the most. Chapter 13. 2. Furor at the apothecary's, miss. You dropped your handkerchief. Auntie, do you still want these vegetables? Hold it right there. You've not yet paid. Make way, make way. Everyone's clustered up here. All the voices suddenly quietened. On a particular street in the capital city, it was almost completely stuffed up, obstructed by a gathered crowd. And the place that the people were gathered at was an old and well-known apothecary shop named Global Aid Hall. Business at that shop had not been all that good because the proprietor was an obstinate man. Not only was he inflexible in business, every single one of the herbs in his shop was ridiculously expensive, with the cheapest among them at 100 silver taels. According to him, all these herbs had grown in places where spirit energy was highly abundant and their effects were 10 times better than regular herbs. But no one believed him and just merely took it as a joke. One person spread the joke and 100 people shared it with others, till Global Aid Hall's business grew more and more bleak. But the proprietor still persisted with his views, believing that there would still be people who would recognize the real worth of his goods. And today, one who knew their worth had really come. Not only was he able to recognize their value, the shop that no one patronized was now packed to overflowing by the people he had drawn in. The old proprietor stroked his long beard and looked at the tall and slim-figured youth dressed in fine dark reddish-purple clothes, seemingly thoughtful. Proprietor, do you still have any more of this iris grass in stock? I need another 3 bunches. The old man, whose mind was focused on measuring the youth, suddenly realized that he had been called out. When he met the pair of long, upslanted, smiling eyes, his face immediately reddened. Yes, there is. Will the young master just wait a moment while I go fetch it for you now? Upon saying that, he then went into the back of the hall. This youth has such devilishly good looks. Haha. He is smiling at me. How could anyone be so beautiful? A young lady about 16 or 17 bit on her handkerchief, so excited her eyes were tearing slightly. To have seen such peerless beauty in this life, it's worth it even if this woman me were to die. An auntie in plain and simple clothes could not help but exclaim agitatedly, "You bonehead! I was wondering why you're not selling meat there, but came running over to Global Aid Hall instead. So you came here to gawk at that pretty boy." A woman that was about 30+ years of age stood there fiercely with one hand on her hip, the other pulling hard upon the burly man's ear, causing him to yelp out in pain. "My dear. A little lighter, little lighter. It's just that I have never seen such a handsome-looking young man, and I only came to have a peek."
Bah.
Listen to yourself. A big man like you would be peeking at the young ladies, and here you are staring at a young man. The woman spat a mouthful and then turned her eyes wide and big as Belle's to look inside, seeking to see just what that little brat could possibly look like, to have drawn her husband here. The old proprietor had just come out from inside, holding 3 bunches of iris grass in his hands as he passed them over to the young lad. "Young master, you've bought quite a lot. 5 bunches of iris grass, 1 color glazed fruit, 2 blood wheat flowers, totaling up to be 2,350 silver taels. I'll give you a discount. I'll make it just 2,200 silver taels." "Thank you, proprietor. This is 2,200 inside." Qingyu smiled and handed him a gold card. She had earned quite a lot of money just from elixirs over the years, and she thought nothing of such a small sum. She kept the herbs properly and then turned herself around to go out. That was when she discovered that the doors had been blocked up, and she was taken aback with shock for a moment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She had been too focused selecting the herbs earlier and had not noticed this. And that split second of bewilderment in those enchanting phoenix-like eyes had still been spotted by the fanatical crowd.
Ah.
That is just too adorable to take. Like the blank, bewildered eyes of a small animal. This woman's young, brittle heart. This was from the woman who had just admonished her husband, her expression hopelessly infatuated. Chapter 14. 1. Man and wife in their previous lives, she had forgotten that she was just berating her husband a moment ago. "Little young master, what's your name? How old are you this year? Where do you live? Let big sister here walk you home, all right, ha ha ha." Everyone stared at the woman scornfully. "With that big face and thick body of yours, with the fact that you're already past 30, you can jolly be seen as the lad's mother. Big sister, pooh. How shameless. Isn't your pickup line too corny?" Qingyu was speechless. Rubbing her temples, she smiled helplessly. "Excuse me, can I pass through? I still have more things I need to do." The extent of the situation truly did not leave a single gap between the people in the crowd. Even the slender and petite-sized Qingyu was not able to squeeze herself out. The moment that gentle voice of hers came out, it was as if everyone fell under a spell. The people uniformly spread to the sides to open up a path for her, their eyes entranced with mindless adoration as they were all fixed upon the lad. This youth was truly the pet of the heavens, so beautiful to look at from far, that beauty completely flawless when seen up close. Under the raptured gazes of everyone, Qingyu then departed fleetingly. After some moments, someone regained his senses and went charging inside the Global Aid Hall. "Proprietor, did the little lad just now leave a name?" No." The old proprietor shook his head helplessly. "The herb was touched by that little young master earlier. I want to buy it." "I want it too. I saw this first. It's mine." "Humph. The highest price wins. I'll pay 100 taels. Seeing who has more money, I'll pay 500 taels. All of you do not need to compete with this woman here. This woman is taking out all of my secret stash here. 5,000 taels. You sneaky woman." The old proprietor had not seen the inside of a shop so busy for many years already, and he had not thought that one single youth would bring him so much riches today. His eyes then narrowed up. He's really the Global Aid Hall's benefactor. What happened in here? A blue-robed young master, holding a folding fan in his hand, poked his head in and asked curiously, Don't come interfering with my purchase of that little young master's herbs. The man being asked was also a young man, who did not even turn his head around as he snapped impatiently, disregarding the other man completely. Puffed! An undisguised mocking snicker immediately caused the blue-robed man's face to turn bright red. Mo Fei ran. What are you laughing at? Oh, nothing. The elegant white-robed man quickly shook his head solemnly, suddenly turning stern-looking. I have said that you should not fool around with women so much. See how unsteady your steps are. Dark eye rings. Look, even the charm you've always been so proud of has dropped so drastically. Utter nonsense. I checked myself in the mirror before I came out today. How dare you malign me like that? The blue-robed man was furious, fire burning in his eyes. Haha, are you a woman? Checking yourself in the mirror? You just exposed yourself there. Ha ha ha. The two of you must have been man and wife your previous life. From behind, a man in a dark green robe, slender figure with a gentle and handsome-looking countenance commented expressionlessly. Hence, the two of you are destined to love, but will kill each other in the end. The smile on Mo Fei Ran's face then froze, while the blue-robed Yu Jingjue was also stunned. Man and wife. Love, but kill each other. What the hell? Your Highness' mouth usually doesn't say much, but once you do, it scares even my mother for heaven's sake. That man was Xianyuan Che himself. The other two men were two among the few good friends he had. Yu Jingjue was the left prime minister's second son, and Mo Fei Ran was General Shang's eldest grandson. The two of them had grown up together with Xianyuan Che, and they were of a similar age. The three of them were also in the Faint Mist sect, all of them possessing a significant level of cultivation. Chapter 14. 2. Man and wife in their previous lives, all right, stop the nonsense. It's rare that we could come out from the sect for some leisure. Mo Fei Ran said with a helpless shrug of his shoulders. Che, let's go get a couple of drinks. Upon saying that, he hooked his arm around Xianyuan Che's shoulders. Xianyuan Che's eyebrow arched up, and he slipped out from under Mo Fei Ran's arm without indifferently. What you should be doing now is to soothe a certain man's wounded heart. Mo Fei Ran was suddenly taken aback, where he then saw Yu Jingjue beside him, who was looking at him with darkened eyes that looked like he was going to kill someone. A chill ran through his body. Why are you looking at me like that? You make it clear to this young master here right this instant. Which part of this young master's steps is unsteady, and where do you see dark eye rings? Though this young master here is flirtatious, but I have never touched any of those women before. He was still a pure-hearted man, all right? Oh, Mo Fei Ran nodded his head and exclaimed meaningfully. Now I know. Jingjue is still a virgin. His eyes were filled with mocking ridicule. After all, in the Green Wave Kingdom, when a boy reached 12 years of age, they would have a live-in personal servant girl that resides within an adjoining room to the boys' bedchambers, and they could marry once they are 14 years old. Yu Jingjue was already 19 and was still without a woman. Hence, it was hard for people to not suspect otherwise. Especially for a nefarious friend like Mo Fei Ran, who found joy in teasing him mercilessly.
Damn you.
Mo Fei Ran, I'll fight you to the death. It was truly a case of even if the uncle could tolerate it, the aunt couldn't hold back anymore. Those two people came to blows right in the middle of the street, not caring about their illustrious identities at all. The two of them were known to everyone in the capital city, as they were frequently fooling around as a whole bunch of rascals, usually appearing together as a group. But there were only two of them today, and how did they come to be fighting each other like dreadful enemies? As for Xianyuan Che, no one knew where he had slipped off to even before those two started to brawl. It was known that those two were always unruly, but not to such an extent. He must have been mad to have agreed to meet up to reminisce about old times. Back to Qingyu, after she finally managed to shake off the maniacal crowd, she slipped herself in through the gathered Cloudloft's back door and heaved a sigh of relief. Sheesh, those people are too frightening.
Are.
That person is. A cry of delighted surprise reached her, and Qingyu raised her head. She saw two women not too far away, seemingly rather excited to see her. Me? Qingyu pointed at herself, her face one of bewilderment. Young Master Qing.
She remembered that voice.
It was the little beauty who had ruthlessly wanted to kill her before, Lianji. That woman had seemed to wish for nothing more than to be able to eat her alive back on that day, so why was she being so welcoming today? Something's not right. Those two other women had also been rather excited when they saw her just now. You've finally come. You've saved me the trouble of looking for you. Lianji came walking over and pulled her hand to bring her scurrying towards a certain location. Release me first. Where are you bringing me? Tell me first. There's no time. Come with me to see our Lord first. We searched the whole wide world and could not find you. Fortunately, you have come.
Huh.
Looking for her? Of course, they would not be able to locate her. They were searching for a young lad, but she's a girl. After a series of left and right turns, just as Qingyu was growing dizzy from the endless turns, Lianji finally came to a stop before a loft building. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The place stood independently detached, which made Qingyu realize that the gathered cloud loft truly was a place where there was a lot more to it than meets the eye. From the outside facade, it was clearly just a small little place, but it seemed as though the inside had another space and time, where it was incredibly vast. The level of luxury and opulence of this place was seen to be about equal to the eternal peace, Duke's Manor. Lianji pushed the door open and went in, leading her in a direction that kept to the right, and they finally came before a door. She then announced, "My lord, young Master Qing has come." It was almost instantaneous that the door was opened and an enchanting red-robed man appeared before their eyes. Chapter 15. 1. A grubworm resides just above the little brother. Qingyu looked at the man before her eyes, and she lifted an eyebrow up in slight surprise. This is... The last time she saw this man, he was a handsome-looking and enchanting man. What had happened to this messy-haired person in torn and tattered clothes with a big blue bruise on his face? When Bai Yan saw her, his eyes were filled with undisguised fervor. When she was waiting for him to speak up, a tyrannically loud crash sounded inside, accompanied by a voice that cursed sinisterly. Bai Yan, you better pray that you will be able to bind this lord forever. The weak smile on Bai Yan's lips stiffened. He was guessing that he would most probably not be able to escape death this time. That man must be wishing for nothing more than to be able to strangle him to death. What happened? Qingyu noticed the expression on his face and went straight past him into the room. It was dimly lit inside, the walls inlaid with densely packed fluorescent rocks that glowed in darkness. And upon the only bed in there was a man seated cross-legged. His body looked to be highly stiffened up as he sat there unmoving. Qingyu's heart was puzzled, and she walked over to him with a few steps. That was when he saw that the man's upper half of his body was bare, his fair skin covered with a kind of abnormal red, and that pair of devilishly alluring eyes strangely showed one to be violet, while the other displaying a swirling blue and red, the original violet in that eye almost being completely engulfed. Seeing that someone was approaching, that one's strange eyes swept coldly over. Young Master Qing, dodge. In a fluster, Bai Yan had let her barge past him, and suddenly seeing that she had made her way straight over to the lord, his heart almost stopped from fright. The blue and red eyes suddenly shot a menacing ray of light right at Qingyu. Bai Yan's face filled up with terror, and he summoned up his speed, all prepared to go rescue the stunned little lad from there. But he then saw that figure disappear into thin air. The next second, the lad appeared without a sound just a half step's distance away from Lu Junyao, and her slender hand whipped out lightning quick to strike pointedly 2 times at the strange eye. In an instant, that eye seemed to lose its sparkle, before it slowly closed. The other full violet eye that had been filled with a tyrannical aura also gradually quietened down. Bai Jiyan had not been able to get close to his lord before, and he was not aware that his lord had not been conscious all this while, but his body had just been lashing out to attack indiscriminately. Bai Jiyan was overwhelmed in shock when he saw Qingyu standing there safe and sound, where he then stepped in close as well. What is going on? Lu Junyao had one eye tightly shut and the other open, but it looked hollow and lifeless, like his spirit had left from his body. Tell me first what happened to him. How long has he been in this state? Qingyu's brows were tightly knitted together, her tone unconsciously tinged with a certain amount of severity. Bai Jiyan was stunned for a moment. After the Lord took the elixir you left behind that day, he showed clear signs of improvement in his condition. However, he suffered another relapse that very night, but not much change showed up on his body except that he became exceptionally violent and kept attacking me. So I had no choice but to confine him in here. But though the Lord's body is immobile, the power his eyes are able to shoot out still packs quite a blast, and I was hit several times by him. Bai Jiyan said with a bitter laugh as he rubbed his aching chest. I had been too careless. Qingyu lowered her eyes, her expression slightly remorseful. I had not thought that such a thing would appear in this world. Chapter 15. 2. A grubworm resides just above the little brother. When she had first seen the man afflicted with the demonic ice and fire poison, she had been very surprised, because people who were afflicted with such a poison would not be able to withstand the way it ravaged the body. But he was still living after so long, and that was really rather amazing. An idea had briefly crossed her mind then, but she had quickly denied any possibility of it. She had not thought that the slimmest sliver of possibilities had really come true. This man was not afflicted by any so-called demonic ice and fire poison. Living in his body was a ice and fire yin-yang grub that was at least 200 years old. A grub named among the top 10 demonic larvae and grubs in the heavenly. The ice and fire yin-yang grub would find nourishment by feeding on a human's essence. Conversely, it would also cause its victim's cultivation to increase exponentially, giving him tyrannical and invincible power. But once the grub was feeding on displays that maniacal power increased 3 times, then the human host would not be that far from having his life essence completely depleted. What was most prickly about the whole situation was that that kind of grub was extremely contemptible. The hosts that it chose were only handsome-looking male specimens with high levels of cultivation, and the location it resided in within the person was at the man's lower abdomen, near to the little brother. Damn it! She just could not continue on with that thought. Qingyu's face looked highly constipated, and a vein throbbed on her forehead as she looked sympathetically at the unconscious Lu Junyao. Bai Jiyan stared at the young lad with a suspicious look on his face. Why was the youth looking at the Lord like that? And staring at that particular part of the Lord's body. Young Master Qing. Unable to hold himself back from calling out to interrupt the youth's chaotic thoughts. With the Lord like this, is there a way to cure him? There is a way. Qingyu drew in a deep breath and then rubbed her temples in frustration. Why must she meet with such a predicament? That disgusting little grub would turn her stomach for months at least. She looked at Bai Jiyan, whose face was one of complete bewilderment. Her expression serious, she then said, I need to tell you the truth, if you are able to take it.
What?
Bai Jiyan asked in puzzlement. In your lord's lower abdomen, 3 inches above his little brother, resides a grub of pure evil. What? What did you say? Bai Jiyan was completely shocked, his pair of pretty peach blossom-like eyes 2 wide circles as he stared. Can you tell me one more time? I said, he is not afflicted with any devilish ice and fire poison, but a parasitical grub called the ice and fire yin-yang grub is living in his body. That little worm is now comfortably lying in his lower abdomen in that sensitive position and showing off blatantly. As to how she would know that that disgusting little fellow was showing off, ever since she inherited the heavenly, she had cultivated her pair of heavenly blessed life-saving eyes that were able to see through a patient's body. At that moment, that grub was waving the antennae on its head, staring at her with its two baleful eyes. Heavenly, you dare stare? Heh, you don't know doom is upon you. You will only be able to prance for a while longer, and I will be your doombringer. The harmless-looking smile upon the lad's face, even when it was seen through its male host's body. The ice and fire yin-yang grub could not help but subconsciously feel fear run through itself, causing its body to shrink back and cower. This youth was somehow giving it an uneasy feeling. Caught in a long spell of silent speechlessness, Bai Jian was further struck senseless by the heavy weight of the news he had just heard. All that time they had thought that it was some devilish ice and fire poison was now all realized to be just a complete joke. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU grub larvae? But however one looked at him, this lad had not even come of age. He's still so young. How could he possibly be able to tell that the Lord's condition was not poison? Bai Jian was even more certain at that moment that the lad was definitely not from these low-grade lands. He was not so arrogant as to assume that the Heavenly Healers sect was the proficient and skilled in medicine, and sure enough, there's always someone stronger and better, another heaven beyond the heavens. He could not help but to mock himself in laughter. Chapter 16. 1. Little monster from the low-level lands, is there a way that will allow the Lord awakens? Bai Jian knew that the lad definitely possessed the ability to do that. Without knowing why, from the first time he saw the young lad, he felt that the kid seemed to possess a certain kind of strange and amazing powers. A kind of power that could change the impossible into a possibility. Qingyu nodded her head rather helplessly. But I think it would be better that he remains unconscious for the moment. The man on the bed had fair skin upon his muscular chest, the strong outlines highly perfect, lean but exuding the beauty of strength. That was a figure that one would have nothing to pick on. The amount of light in the room was a little dim, and only an approximate idea of his facial features could be seen, but he was definitely a handsome man. Those violet eyes were as pretty as crystals, and even though he was not conscious at that moment where there was no life in those eyes, they were still exceptionally enchanting. That disgusting worm, it really knew how to pick its host. I will produce an essence elixir that the ice and fire yin-yang grub loves to eat within the next 2 days. I'll then use that to lure the miserable worm from his body, and it will be troublesome for me to carry out the treatment if your lord is conscious. Qingyu kindly explained when she saw Bai Jian looked highly confused. In actual fact, what really worried her was whether this man's heart was strong enough to withstand seeing her lure out the grub inside his body. If the shock became too great for him to take and his little brother withered from fright, then she would become a sinner. After all, it was in such a sensitive position. Bai Jian felt that she was being highly thorough, and his expression turned into one of immense gratitude. Thank you, young Master Qing. If you are able to save my lord and not let him suffer any more of this torment, the entire Heavenly Healers sect will remember this debt of benevolence you have shown. Heavenly Healers sect. Qingyu lifted up an eyebrow as she contemplated on it thoughtfully for a moment. She then realized that there did not seem to be any of the Heavenly Healers sect's people within these lands, and she immediately knew that these men were definitely not ordinary people. Young Master Qing should have heard of the Heavenly Healers sect. Although I do not know what kind of a revered master the young master studied under, but the Heavenly Healers sect could be considered to be a big sect of alchemists that enjoy highly significant fame in Cloud Heaven. Bai Jian's smile was gentle, his words faintly probing. He was still very curious just what kind of identity this young lad really possessed. Looks so outstanding, cultivation in alchemy profound and unfathomable. There were quite a number of reclusive masters hidden in Cloud Heaven, but it was wondered which of those maven masters was his. I do not have a master. Bai Jian's smile froze on his lips. I really do not have a master. Qingyu curled up her lips. All my medical skills and knowledge were passed down from my family, and I comprehended them on my own. She had been inculcated to be the next head of the family from birth, and besides cultivating day and night, comprehending, buried, and heavenly were the only kind of leisure she had available to her. Heavenly, buried, the level of cultivation and her accomplishment in medicine all stemmed from loneliness. Because of that loneliness, she was able to attain such boundless power and knowledge in cultivation. For so many years, besides her weapon spirit, there was nothing else that had given her any company. So in this life, she only wanted to live happily and to live her life as she liked. Then expression on Qingyu's face then became more relaxed. Here she was telling it to him so nonchalantly, not seeing Bai Jian's face that looked like he had seen a ghost. No master? The kid did not have a master? What kind of a prodigious gift would one need to possess for someone to attain a stage like what this young lad has? Even Bai Jian, who was well acclaimed to be the most prodigious genius of the heavenly healers sect in 1,000 years, had finished his tutelage at 17 years of age, as all the teachers had nothing more to teach him further. His gift might have even surpassed his great-grandfather, who was proclaimed to be a legend. This young lad. Young Master Qing looks to be very young. You should be about 16? Although the lad had a rather thin figure, but his looks and height was definitely around that of someone around 15 or 16 years of age. Chapter 16. 2. Little monster from the low-level lands having been asked her age, Qingyu was taken aback a moment, but she then quickly answered with a smile, I will be 14 in another month. Completely oblivious to the kind of hurt that she was delivering onto Bai Jian. So it could be said that this lad was only 13 years old? 13? Now I've seen everything. Then young Master Qing, which location in Cloud Heaven do you reside in? I can see that you carry an unusual air around you, and I would think that you must be from a famous family or nobility. Cloud Heaven. Where is that place? I am native to the Greenwave Kingdom and have lived all my life on this land from birth. The lad still had a smile on his face as he answered the question that was almost bordering upon his personal privacy. Bai Jian could find no words to say. Leave me alone. I need quiet. A monstrous 13-year-old, a little monster who was born and grew up in this lowly lands. He just could not believe it. The little kid must have lied to him. If that was really true, he as Bai Jian might as well die. There wouldn't be a need for him to live anymore. Eternal Peace Duke's Manor. Upon a large sandalwood table, several exquisite-looking and delicious food had been laid out with a circle of people seated around it. On the main seat was the head of the family, Yan Su, and in the 2 seats closest to him sat the 2 most favored and doted upon siblings, Yan Ningluo and Yan Shicheng. Subsequently, seated in a descending order, were the 2 charming and alluring royal concubines, their daughters, and then followed by the lady concubines. The Duchess was not in good health and seldom came out from her own courtyard. Maybe only Yan Su himself knew that she had become utterly disappointed with him and was unwilling to see this big family of people she absolutely detested. Yan Su's eyes surveyed one round over the table and then opened his mouth to say, "Enjoy the meal." Yan Shicheng's brows were, however, creased up. Why do I not see Qingyu and Qingbei here? He had clearly asked the servants to go inform the tranquil abode. Little Cheng, what did you say? Yan Su asked, looking at him doubtfully. Besides Yan Shicheng and Yan Ningluo, whom he especially favored, he couldn't even remember the names of his other children. Hence, when Yan Shicheng said that, he didn't even know how to react towards what his son was saying. Yan Ningluo's hand that was holding her chopsticks paused, her gaze narrowing slightly. Why has Big Brother suddenly come to pay attention to those 2 people in the tranquil abode? Father, you've said it before. A family feast needs everyone to come attend, but my younger siblings from the tranquil abode are not here yet. Yan Shicheng said with his brows knitted up. Our heir, with those 2 little bastards, one is weak and timid, the other even a cripple. They have absolutely nothing to show for themselves. How can they eat at the same table as us? The person who spoke looked to be about 30 years of age, her looks alluring and sexy, dressed in a long light green bustier dress, the 2 big lumps of flesh in front of her chest almost bursting out, highly eye-catching. At that moment, She was laughing coyly together with a lady concubine beside her, her demeanor highly nonchalant. This woman was highly favored, and though she was previously a performing dancer, she had a glib tongue and knew how to win a person's heart. Hence, Yen Su bestowed exceptional favor upon her. That woman's words might have been unintentional, but it caused both the faces of Yen Shicheng and Yen Su to immediately change. What audacity! Yen Shicheng suddenly slammed his palm onto the table, giving the women who were laugh a great shock. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You, especially the woman in the green dress, she looked completely stunned from fright. Are the young masters and young misses of the Eternal Peace, Duke's Manor people you can criticize? You called them bastards. Where does that then place my father the Duke? Yen Shicheng's face was highly menacing, looking the way he did on the battlefield when facing the opposing army. Chapter 17. 1. The mystery behind their birth. The woman had obviously not expected things to take such a turn, and she turned woodenly to look at Yen Su's face. As expected, she saw an unfriendly expression, his face dark. She immediately fell from her chair in fright. Your Highness, your lady did not mean it. I beg for your Highness' forgiveness. On her knees, she scampered to go over to Yen Su's side, pushing her ample bosom against his thigh, looking highly seductive. But Yen Su had lost all his mood as he pushed her away from him. To think that this duke had been with such a foolish woman for so many years.
How nauseating!
Your Highness. The woman's face turned pale, realizing that she had committed a grave wrong. Her body trembling as she sobbed in plea, she heard Yen Su say impatiently, "Bring her away from here. This duke does not want to see her at this moment." It was as if a bolt had struck down from clear skies, and she whom had been exceptionally favored was suddenly condemned into hell just because of a statement she made. With Yen Su saying that he did not want to see her anymore, then she would have no chance of rising up again. Don't do this. Your Highness. Your lady has realized her mistake, and I beg for your Highness to give me another chance. Your Highness. Your Highness. The woman was forcefully dragged out by the guards outside the doors. It fell ominously silent around the table, and no one dared to speak another word. Yen Ningluo's eyes were darkened in incomprehension. What was her elder brother thinking? Is he going to turn his elbows outwards to go help those two people? Doesn't he know how much mother hates that woman's children? How could he? Yen Su rubbed his temples to soothe his headache. Little Chung, why have you suddenly come to concern yourself with the manor's internal affairs? And who were you talking about earlier? They live in the tranquil abode. The two children birthed by Lady Qing. Yen Shicheng replied softly. I had gone to see them before, and saw that they were living in abysmal conditions. Even the servants of a slightly higher position were living better than them, and I do not wish for such a thing to spread outside the Eternal Peace Duke's manor, for people to say that we ill-treat the children of deceased concubines. Yen Su's expression turned slightly startled. Lady Qing. The foolish woman, one who insisted on protecting her two children even at the cost of her own life. That's right. It should have been 10 years since her death. It has been so many years that he was almost about to forget that such a person had once existed. Maybe he did not forget, but just that he did not want to remember that sorrowful past. You are a good man, but I am already someone's wife. I am currently on the run, and I do not want to drag you into it. I do not care, and I am not afraid of being implicated. I only want to protect you. Yen Su, I am already with child. The cold and peerless beauty's expression was so unbelievably gentle at that moment, so beautiful, and a look he had never seen before. Even if it was only to protect just that short ephemeral smile, he was most willing to. Then, let me the child's father, and allow me to protect both of you. Despite the fact that he already had a wife and children, but for some unknown reason, he just could not seem to control his heart but to be attracted to her. Like a moth to a burning flame. Even if he had to give up his own life, it would be sweet as syrup to him. That person had exactly that kind of charm to make people fall head over heels. But he had come to feel an inexplicable kind of jealousy towards the man, the one who had been able to possess her, a man whom she had been willing to carry his child for. And he himself had now gone back on his word, having promised to protect her children, but he had never cared about them before, to the extent that he never knew what they looked like at all. It was his jealousy that had blinded both his eyes, that made his heart turn cold and hard as steel. Yen Su was immediately feeling rather exhausted, and he stood up from his seat. With saying a single word, he then walked slowly out. The remaining people all fell deep in thought, everyone making their own guesses in their minds. Chapter 17. 2. The mystery behind their birth. Yan Ningluo was also not in the mood to eat together with these women, and she pulled her chair back to stand up as the chair made an ear-piercing screech. "Big brother, come outside with me for a moment." The sibling pair then walked out one behind the other. Under a quiet pavilion within the Duke's manor, Yan Ningluo's face was cold as she said insipidly, "Why are you speaking up for those people from the tranquil abodes?" Yan Shicheng creased up his brows. "What about it? What about it?" Yan Ningluo's lips stiffened as she turned her eyes back to look at him. "Don't you know that the reason Mother has shut herself in for so many years is all because of that woman from the tranquil abode? Mother has already been so benevolent to allow that woman's seeds to remain, and Big Brother is now even pleading on their behalf?" Yan Shicheng looked at person who had always been exceptionally beautiful suddenly showing such a cold and malicious-looking face, and his heart sank with a chill. All this must have been thoughts that Mother had inculcated into little Ning from young. Is it really that difficult to tolerate those two siblings? After all, that woman had already died so many years ago and had been laid to rest. Is there any meaning in continuing to hold it against the children? He was suddenly very disappointed in his mother. "Little Ning, you don't understand." Yan Shicheng shook his head. "The pain that woman brought upon Mother has already been repaid back in folds by her two children. A mother's debts must be paid back by her children.
It is still not enough by far.
She was the one who torn our family apart," Yan Ningluo said in a shrill voice.
You're so naive.
"Then how are you going to explain the existence of that bunch of other women in the back manor? All of this was caused by Father." Yan Shicheng suddenly did not feel like continuing to talk with this obstinate little sister of his. His emotions were rather unstable today, and he should instead be calming his heart down to go practice his cultivation. Yen Su did not go back to his room. His steps had unknowingly brought him to the tranquil abode he had come so many countless times before. He still remembered that she loved the swing. Every time he came over, he would see her sitting upon the swing and caressing her abdomen, speaking gently to the child in her tummy, the scene beautiful and touching. 10 years have passed, and everything here has changed. There was no long that swing he was familiar with, but just a stretch of quiet overgrowth. On both sides of the yard, many vibrant and beautiful plants had been planted, the surroundings filled with vegetation and shrubbery, the place looking just like a piece of the old woods deep in the mountains. Just as Yen Su was deeply entranced by the surroundings, the tightly shut doors suddenly opened with a creak. A tall and slender figure came walking out from inside. Her head of long hair like a waterfall was lightly bound up, the simple white dress worn on that person exuding an indescribable sense of pure enchanting beauty, where just the back view already made one's heart race and the mind captivated. She carried a wooden bucket in her hand, sprinkling the green liquid inside onto the plants, shining with lustrous brilliance, beautiful beyond compare. Yen Su was spellbound at that moment as a twig snapped under his feet. The person heard the noise, and she turned her body around to look in puzzlement. Yen Su's eyes flared wide as he stared. Those mesmerizing eyes were overflowing with brilliant light, the elegant nose outstanding and sharp, the corners of her faintly pink lips slightly lifted, forming an incredibly irresistible arc. Her skin was fair as could be, especially under the sun's ray. It seemed almost translucent in its smoothness, her face's beauty completely flawless. The two people looked at each other over that distance between them for a moment. Thereafter, that person's eyes then blinked, and the arc at the ends of her lips deepened further, to reveal a faint smile. Qing Fei. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You know it's impossible. How could two people possibly look so much alike? Even the arc at the corners of their lips she showed when they first met was almost exactly alike. Yen Su was shocked to the core, and he did not have the courage to remain there a moment longer, immediately taking quick steps to depart from that place. Haha, interesting. Chapter 18. 1. Nightmare. From today on, you shall take my name. Since I met you in the night, then why not I call you Yi Li? The Li in your name does not represent parting, but rather a reunion after a long time, because I will never abandon you again. You bottled-up gourd, why are you always so silent? If I didn't know better, I would have thought that you're mute. Humans are selfish after all, huh? Little Yi, I had thought that such a thing would never happen to me, but all the bliss and joy were just an illusion. Little Yi, we cannot see each other anymore. I am getting married. I'm sorry that I cannot keep my promise. Little Yi, live a good life. Don't be foolish like me. In this world, there is no such thing as a true heart. I'm sorry, Little Yi, I am leaving. Blood, a lot of blood was flowing out from her body and staining her pure white wedding gown. From such a tiny little body, why is there so much blood? In the end, the entire room was all covered in blood. Blood was beginning to spill out from inside her eyes, but a smile still hung on her lips. I must look very ugly like this.
Haha.
I did not think that I will die looking so ugly. Cough, cough, cough. You must not talk anymore. He was feeling panic for the first time in his life as he frantically wiped off the blood from the corners of her lips incessantly. The blood just would not stop flowing. Haha, Little Yi, it's so bizarre. I am actually feeling that you are worried about me and are not longer that cold and emotionless wooden person anymore. She had become so weak she could not move anymore, but to just lie limply in his arms. However, her mouth was still spewing out words that teased him. What must I do to save you?
Tell me.
It no use. It was time that I should have soared, but unfortunately I failed and was devoured instead. All my powers have completely dispersed. For one's lifelong cultivation to have dispersed, such a fate to her was as good as having dug her own grave. You did that deliberately, didn't you? Why did you do that? The man's eyes were red and bloodshot, his handsome face contorted and fiercely twisted up in rage. You deliberately sought your own death, didn't you? Hayes, I can never hide things from you. The woman said with a weak, helpless laugh. This is the first time I am seeing you dare to raise your voice at me. You're really too much. She struggled very hard to raise a hand up slowly, to caress his cheek gently. Promise me this. After I die, sneak my ashes out. Anywhere else is fine, but just don't leave me in this place. Live well, you fool. Those people are still not aware of your abilities and only see you as a normal person. Otherwise, they would have tried all ways and means to make use of you. There will be no one to shield you when I'm no longer around. You must not forget. You must escape from here. You fools. Search them out right this instant. How could all of you lose them under your guard? A flurry of hurried footsteps sounded outside. Those people had come to bring her back. A large amount of blood suddenly spilled out from the corners of the woman's lips, and the exquisite and beautiful wedding gown on her body at that moment looked a garishly hair-raising sight, with the stark contrast between white and red. Little Yi, remember my words. Live out your life.
Well,
I am very tired. Her body suddenly emitted a strong, brilliant golden glow that lit up the entire skies, incredibly blinding. When the light subsided, everything then fell back into silence. The person in his arms no longer spoke, her eyes closed, her body cold. She had died. The light earlier had been the essence of her soul departing from her body, to turn into fine dust and disperse into nothing. The angry and frantic chatter of voices grew closer, but he seemed to not have heard a thing. He remained there in that position, his eyes empty and hollow. Chapter 18. 2. Nightmare. The scene when they had first met was still so clear in his mind. That was such a fair-skinned countenance with exquisite features, with crescent-shaped eyes, and reaching straight for his hand, completely unbothered by the wretched state he was in. "Are you willing to come with me?" It was not an attempt to ask for his opinion at all, as the grasp of a hand closed over his, holding him firmly without allowing him to refuse at all. That small person was clearly being so warm, but that tiny hand was instead bitingly cold. Clasped together with his warm hand, it sent a shiver running through him from the chill. I'm sorry, my hand is really cold, isn't it? It is caused by my method of cultivation. Haha, let's do it this way. I'll rub my hands together a bit, and it will not be cold anymore." She rubbed her hands together vigorously and breathed into her palms repeatedly. Watching that scene, it had looked rather silly. He probably had not noticed the smile at the corners of his own lips. After that, unexplainably, he who had always been highly wary towards all living beings in this world then just stuck his hand out on his own, to say in a restrained voice, "I'm not cold." Hearing that, the little person was taken aback a moment, and then held his hand happily, using him as a warming stove. And for so many years, once winter came, she just loved to be huddled together with him to keep warm. No one would come to stick to him like this anymore. No one would rascally stick their icy cold hand down the back of his neck to prank him anymore. No one would be able to give him the warm feeling his life had become so refreshing. She had said, "You are not my servant, and also not my subordinate. You are not allowed to call me young Mississippi. Since I call you little ye, he, then you can call me little you." What a heartwarming name it was to call, but a pity he never dared to call it out that easily, as that would only bring trouble to her. Hence, despite the disappointment on her face every time, he did not call out her name. They gradually grew up after that, and she no longer persisted on that. The handsome-looking man gradually regained focus in his eyes, and his parched lips parted. Slowly, in an almost inaudible voice, his mouth spat out 2 words. "Little. You." Alas, she could not longer hear. Never ever hear again. Waking up with his face streaked with tears once again, the man's consciousness was seemingly still caught up in his dream. A suffocating ache filled his chest. His heart was clearly still beating strongly, but his body was incredibly cold. In that midsummer season, his body felt like it was enveloped with the icy winter's chill. This terrifying nightmare was one he could not escape from ever since that time. His hand clutched at his chest. He gasped heavily for air. "Your Highness, are you all right, Your Highness? You had a nightmare again?" The door was opened suddenly, and a good-looking youth parted the thin silk screen as he leaned over to pat the man's chest anxiously. "Is this all right? Feeling better already?" Qing Yili's eyes flashed with an icy chill, and his huge hand swept out. The youth's body flew out like a kite with a broken string, vomiting out a mouthful of blood. "Your Highness, please quell your anger. Your subordinate had a moment of anxiety, breached the taboo. I beg for your Highness to mete out your punishment." The youth seemed to not have even felt the pain, as he knelt upon the floor, his head buried low on the floor. This god of slaughter hated people's touch the most. Regardless whether it was man or woman, anyone that got too close would die, and there had never been any exception before. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You get out. An icy cold voice that sounded like a demon from hell boomed, causing the youth to quake violently, seemingly never expecting that he would be able to get out from this alive. Recovering from stunned shock, he quickly retreated outside. Qing Yili came down from his bed, and as he moved, a sliver of snowy white fell onto his shoulder. His expression quickly turned to one of surprise. Chapter 19. 1. Luring the grub, his gaze subconsciously looked to the side, where there was a half-body's length mirror. A tall and straight-backed figure was reflected in it, the head of hip-length hair exceptionally striking, silvery, white, almost like snow. At many a time, he was unable to differentiate whether he was in his dreams or reality. And this person before him, even after so long, still felt so unfamiliar. After Little Yu died, he had followed her last wishes to sneak her outside. Unfortunately, that maniac of a man had cruelly not even wanted to spare her dead body. Just as he was escaping from that devil's nest with Little Yu's body, he was discovered. That man ordered the assassins under him to injure him heavily, and the man even went on to tear up Little Yu's wedding gown before his eyes. The girl's eyes were closed, her expression peaceful, so gentle and beautiful that she looked like a sleeping beauty. She would never wake up anymore, never to move again, and wasn't able to retaliate. The girl whom he saw as a goddess was made to suffer such humiliation even after her death. He was being held down by several people. But right at that moment, an insane thought suddenly came into his mind. He wanted to kill this man, to kill this demon who sought to taint Little Yu. A change seemed to come over his body at that moment, where the powers in him surged explosively. His black hair that was level with his ears suddenly grew long at an exponential speed, turning silvery white as snow as it spread out tyrannically, causing the assassins to release the grip on him subconsciously. He saw the fear in the man's eyes, but a pity it was already too late. The one and only thought in his head was to tear him up to shreds. He wanted the world to be covered in blood, to let the world that caused the girl's death to never ever see the light of day again. He embarked on a berserk massacre, and after that, he had suddenly found himself here in this strange world. The only thing he knew was that this was a world completely different from the one he had been in, but there were similarities as well. The people here cultivate themselves as well, and the spirit energy here seemed to be denser, where cultivation progress was a lot faster than the previous world. He had fallen into a deep sleep this time because he had reached the bottleneck of another level's peak, where the power became uncontrollable, and going into deep sleep would allow him to slowly absorb that power. Now his entire body was feeling incredibly relaxed, and just what kind of a level he had attained was something he did not know himself, as the way he cultivated was completely different from the people here after all. If Little Yu is still around, she would surely know. Little Yu. Qing Yili could not help but mutter softly, and his eyes suddenly narrowed as an audacious thought came into his mind. Could Little Yu possibly still be alive? Since he was still alive, then she who had already reached the half-divine realm could not possibly have fallen just like that. That's right, this must be the case. For a person who was so kind-hearted, she should not disappear just like that. Maybe she might have come to this strange lands just like him as well. Qing Yili took a deep breath, and his long, slender hand stretched out, a silvery white pearl suddenly appearing in his hand. Nah, this is for you. What is it? It contains a sliver of my consciousness in there. If a day comes that you cannot find me or you encounter danger, crush it, and I will be able to sense it. That bit of consciousness had been entrusted to him for so many years, and he could never bear to use the pearl. But now, he could only depend on it to find Little Yu. I am fine. I hope that everything is great for you as well. Qing Yili closed his eyes, and without any more hesitation, he clenched his fist and crushed the pearl in his palm. Hopefully, it was not too late. Ugh. The girl, who was completely focused on her elixir refinement, suddenly felt a stab of stinging pain in between her brows. Chapter 19. 2. Luring the grub, seeing the elixir that was about to be successfully cultivated suddenly about to be ruined, she quickly bit down on the tip of her tongue and pushed another sliver of her mental power into it, just managing to save the elixir. She then carefully kept the elixir in a specially crafted porcelain bottle before she heaved a sigh of relief. What just happened there? Qing Yu muttered as she massaged her temples. That had touched her right in the core of her spirit, a feeling that had been so intimate and familiar. Don't tell me. Impossible, that's not possible. I must be mistaken. Qing Yu laughed as she shook her head to herself. She still had to resolve that troublesome problem today to repay the debt she owed, and she didn't have the time to think too much about it. Gathered clouds loft, young Master Qing. What are you doing? Bai Zhiyan stared in open-mouthed surprise as the handsome-looking youth very skillfully plucked the clothes off the man lying on the bed in just a few moves, and the lad was just about to extend his demonic claws upon the man's pants. He quickly moved to stop the lad. Why must you remove the clothes? Why was he the one feeling awkward instead when he asked those words? The lad's face was one of complete calm. His good-looking brow was raised up and he asked, "How am I going to find the grub's exact location if I do not take off his clothes?" Must all the clothes be taken off? Bai Zhiyan's face had flushed a deep red, and it was a good while before he found his voice. No need. Qingyu replied indifferently, and she went on to take off the pants on the outside, leaving the teensy tight little pair of shorts inside on him. Bai Zhiyan then blew out a long breath in relief. It's all right, it's still all right. If the demonic god knew that he had allowed people to pluck all his clothes off when he woke up, the Lord would surely have him killed. Qingyu's gaze did not turn away as it swept over the man's perfectly sculpted body, only coming to a stop right below the navel. There was a little creature the size of a fist sleeping comfortably there and snoring away, its body occasionally twitching slightly. She pulled out an exquisitely crafted bottle out from her sleeve and pulled out the stopper. A refreshing fragrance immediately wafted out, the scent causing people to be slightly taken aback. Bai Zhiyan's eyes widened in shock, and he then began to look at that little porcelain bottle, his face seemingly a little pained. Such a supreme grade elixir, and they were really going to feed it to that despicable little worm? That's really infuriating. The scent the elixir was giving out could not possibly be ignored, and it was just too tempting. Even the ice and fire yin-yang grub, which was soundly asleep, twitched in its state of unconsciousness, its closed eyes beginning to swivel around in search for the source of the smell. Suddenly getting excited and agitated, it could not help but to spread torment onto its host. Lu Junyao's brows knitted up tightly despite being in his unconscious state, the color of his complexion turning an ugly shade. The next second, Bai Zhiyan was horrified when he saw that a slight protrusion at the Lord's lower abdomen started to move around, and he could hear a series of sounds that sound like the growl of a stomach when hungry going goo-doo, goo-doo, a highly terrifying sound. Qingyu narrowed her eyes and the corners of her lips curled up. She held the essence elixir between her fingers and held it up in the air right over the spot the grub was squirming. With the scent now closer, the worm was growing impatient. What was originally just a small protrusion started to swell up to become a little bump. This is the moment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qingyu moved her hand forward a little and then smacked it down hard right onto that bump. A little figure then broke out through the flesh of its host's body, lurching ferociously straight at Qingyu. At the moment just before it got too close to Qingyu, its entire body was suddenly caught and held under a powerful force, feeling like it was being crushed under a huge mountain as it fell heavily onto the ground, unable to climb to its feet at all. Qingyu did not pay it any attention after that, but went on to stuff that elixir straight into Lu Junyao's mouth. The elixir immediately melted in his mouth, and it was swallowed down his throat. Damn you, human. That is mine. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.